Chapter 32. Chu Xiu wasn't surprised that Li Zhe said that Li Cheng and Li Yun wanted to kill him. The Li family's situation was different from the Chu family's. Chu Xiu's brothers wished for nothing more than for Chu Xiu to die. They were just short of stabbing him in the face. However, the three brothers of the Li family were born from the same mother. Furthermore, after the death of the Li family's patriarch, they had stood up together to support the Li family. Now that Chu Xiu had killed Li Zhao and Li Zhong, it would be strange if the Li family didn't want to kill him for revenge. Chu Xiu looked at Li Zhe and said casually, "Oh, so what? Or should I say, Li Zhe, what do you want? You are from the Li family, but you came here to tell me that the Li family wants to deal with me. What do you want? Or what can you bring me?" Li Zhe looked at Chu Xiu with an ugly expression. From the moment they had entered, Chu Xiu had been leading the tempo, causing him to be unable to say a single word of what he had wanted to say and deliberately mystify things. At this moment, Li Zhe finally understood that Chu Xiu, who had killed his third brother and caused great damage to the Li family, was indeed not a simple person. Li Zhe didn't keep him in suspense. He said with hatred, "Child Chu Xiu, you should know my position in the Li family. My brothers don't even think of me as a member of the Li family. I just want to take back what belongs to me. Young Master Chu Xiu, since you've killed Li Zhao this time, my eldest brother and second brother have already decided to deal with you. However, I can secretly pass on the news for you, and even help you at a critical moment. We can work together to kill my brothers, but after that, you have to help me become the head of the Li family. I will give you half of the Li family's assets." Chu Xiu wasn't surprised. He poured himself a glass of wine and said lightly, "You believe that I can kill your brothers?" Li Zhe shook his head and said coldly, "I don't trust you, I trust myself. All these years, my eldest brother and second brother didn't give me any power at all, but they don't know that I didn't do nothing all these years." A smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face as he handed the glass of wine to Li Zhe. "I like dealing with straightforward people. Deal." Li Zhe downed the wine in his cup in one gulp and cupped his hands at Chu Xiu. "Young noble Chu Xiu, when the time comes, you will realize that your decision this time was very wise." After speaking, Li Zhe turned and left. He didn't dare to stay for too long, afraid that the Li clan would see him. Chu Xiu took a new cup and poured wine as he said, "It's said that the Li family has 3 tigers, but now it seems that the Li family has 3 tigers and 1 lion." Ma Kuo was confused. 3 tigers and a tiger? What do you mean? Chu Xiu explained, "Legend has it that when a tiger has 3 sons, one must be a lion. This lion is the thinnest and weakest, but it is also the most ruthless. Legend has it that when a tigress crossed the river with her 3 cubs, she had to first carry the cub to the other side, then bring the second cub to the other side. At the same time, she had to carry the cub back, then bring the third cub to the other side, and finally bring the cub to the other side. Going back and forth so laboriously was feared that the cub would take advantage of the absence of the tigress to bite the other cubs to death, not giving the cub and the cub the chance to be alone. I want the position of heir to the Chu family because I want the Chu family's resources. As long as I can sit in this position and get what I want, as long as the other members of the Chu family don't cause trouble, I won't touch them, and I won't harm the Chu family's interests." But look at Li Zhe. He obviously hates his brothers to the core. Killing them is the first priority, and getting the Li family is the second. For this, he is willing to cooperate with me, the enemy of the Li family, and is willing to give up half of the Li family's assets. Isn't his temperament very similar to that of that lion? Ma Kuo couldn't help but shiver when he heard that. He quickly tore off another drumstick and said while chewing, "Boss Pang used to tell us that the most vicious thing is the human heart. The Li family has only been around for a few generations, and it's already like this. Doesn't that mean that the top aristocratic families in Jianghu are fighting even more fiercely?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "That's where you're wrong. The bigger the aristocratic family, the more rules there are. No matter how you fight, you have to abide by the rules. Those who break the rules will be punished by the entire aristocratic family. So no matter how they fight, there is a limit. As long as there is a limit, it won't threaten the interests of the entire aristocratic family. On the contrary, the more they fight, the stronger they become." Looking at Ma Kuo, who was still eating, Chu Xiu stood up and said, "All right, stop eating. Get ready, it's time to kill someone." The Li family's attack was exactly what I wanted. I wanted to do it myself, but my father stopped me. Now that the Li family is ready to kill me, it's reasonable for me to attack the Li family. Ma Kuo nodded and left with Chu Xiu. But before he left, he asked the shopkeeper to pack the golden pheasant for him. He wanted to keep it for supper. At this time, in the Tong state capital, Li Cheng was sitting in the guest hall, waiting for the Shen family's chief steward, Shen Rong. The Shen family's status in the Tong state capital was extraordinary because of Shen Mo's twin brother, the last disciple of the Kanglan sword sect master, Falling Rain Sword, Shen Bai. He was a martial arts rookie who was famous throughout the entire Wei County. With this important relationship, the Shen family almost had the backing of the entire Kanglan sword sect. Not to mention the Tong state capital, even the entire Wei County didn't dare to provoke them. Although Li Cheng was now considered the person in charge of the Li family, it was not easy for him to even see Shen Mo. Even if the person he was asking to see was a housekeeper of the Shen family, he had been left alone in the meeting hall for an hour. The tea had already turned cold. Only when Li Cheng seemed to be a little impatient did Shen Rong walk out of the hall. Shen Rong was about 60 years old, dressed in a luxurious brocade robe, with 2 precious warm jade rings on his thumbs. He didn't look like a steward, but more like a rich man. Seeing Shen Rong, Li Cheng quickly stood up and cupped his hands. "Long time no see, Steward Shen, you look radiant. Seems like you're in a good mood?" Shen Rong smiled and said, "I'm an old man who works for the Shen family. If the family head is in a good mood, I will naturally be in a good mood too. Young brat of the Li family, you don't visit me for no reason. Why are you looking for I this time?" No matter what, Li Cheng was the person in charge of the Li family, but Shen Rong still addressed him as the young brat of the Li family, completely treating Li Cheng as a junior. Although Li Cheng felt a little uncomfortable in his heart, he could only endure it. "Steward Shen, you should have heard about my third brother's matter, right?" Shen Rong nodded and said, "I have heard about it. That second brat of the Chu family was ruthless enough. Not only did he steal the things, he even killed everyone. Your third brother is also unlucky, but he is already dead. You better restrain your grief and accept the vicissitudes." Li Cheng revealed a bitter smile and said, "But I can't swallow this anger. Steward Shen, you know how difficult it was for us 3 brothers to support the Li family. Uncle Zhong stayed in our Li family for dozens of years and was like a father and son to us. In the end, both of them died in the hands of Chu Xiu. I can't swallow this anger, nor can I restrain my grief." Shen Rong frowned. He roughly knew the purpose of Li Cheng's visit. However, Shen Rong still shook his head and said, "Young brat of the Li family, it's not that I want to help you, but dealing with the Chu family is a big matter. It must be decided by the patriarch. I, an old man, don't dare to make a decision." Li Cheng shook his head and said, "I don't have the intention to let the Shen family make a move. I also don't want to deal with the Chu family. This is only a personal hatred between my Li family and Chu Xiu. It is enough to find him to take revenge. However, after killing Chu Xiu, Chu Zongguang will definitely find trouble with my Li family. So this time, I only hope that the Shen family can come forward to protect my Li family when the Chu family retaliates against my Li family. This is enough." Li Cheng looked at Shen Rong and said in a deep voice, "If Steward Shen agrees to my request, I am willing to take out half of the Li family's business as a token of appreciation. Moreover, my Li family is also willing to become the Shen family's vassal and follow the Shen family's lead." Hearing Li Cheng's words, Shen Rong was somewhat moved. Half of the Li family's business was very attractive to him. Although the Shen family treated him well and Shen Mo trusted him, it was impossible for the Shen family's business to be managed by a steward like him. Half of the Li family's business was definitely a big harvest for Shen Rong, and if the Li family submitted to the Shen family because of this, it would also be a great merit. Shen Rong thought for a moment and said, "Young brat of the Li family, I can help you with this matter. But this matter is too big, words are useless. Why don't you leave some evidence now? What do you think?" Li Cheng's eyes revealed a trace of anger. "Shen Rong, this old thing, clearly didn't trust him and even wanted him to write down this shameful thing. But now that he was asking for help, Li Cheng could only obediently write down these conditions. He also wrote his name and stamped his fingerprint. Holding the paper, Shenrong blew the ink on it and smiled at Li Cheng. You can rest assured. You can boldly kill Chu Xiu. Your Li family will be protected by me. Even if Chu Zongguang hates you in his heart, he will not dare to touch the person that my Shen family wants to protect. Li Cheng forced a smile and cupped his hands toward Shenrong. Many thanks, Steward Shen. After exchanging a few words, Li Cheng directly left. When he returned to the Li residence, Li Yun was already waiting for him. Li Yun's side was much smoother than Li Cheng's. It was obvious that Chu Sheng and his mother had already listed Chu Xiu as the strongest opponent for the position of patriarch. This time, they only needed to use a little trick to exchange for Chu Xiu's death. So why not? Li Yun asked Li Cheng, "Big brother, when do we make our move?" Li Cheng's eyes revealed a trace of killing intent as he said, "If we delay, there will be changes. Prepare to make our move tomorrow morning." Chapter 33. In the evening, the second madam called some of the Chu clan's stewards back to the Chu clan. On the surface, she wanted to invite them to a banquet and rope them in, but secretly, she didn't want them to know that the Li clan had made a move against Chu Xiu. She didn't want them to report it. The young masters of the Chu clan would often try to rope in the stewards under them. Putting aside inviting them to a banquet, even if they were to bribe them with money or promise them authority, these stewards wouldn't mind. However, there were a few people who found it strange that the second madam seemed to be spending a lot of money this time. She actually managed to gather so many people. After Chu Sheng drank with the Chu clan stewards, he rubbed his swollen head and returned to his courtyard. The second madam didn't sleep either. "Mother, can the Li clan really get rid of Chu Xiu this time?" The plan had already been arranged, but Chu Sheng suddenly had a feeling of uneasiness when things came to the point. The second madam was very confident. "Don't underestimate the Li clan. They used to be stronger than our Chu clan. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Although the Li clan is weak now, it's still not something that a single Chu Xiu can stop. Just watch. Even if Chu Xiu doesn't die this time, he's pretty much dead." Chu Sheng nodded and rubbed his swollen head, ready to sleep. If he woke up the next morning and heard the news of Chu Xiu's death, that would be good news. Inside the Li clan, Li Cheng and Li Yun had already made their preparations. The truly loyal servants of the Li clan and some of the branch family members with decent martial arts were already standing in the courtyard with their weapons in hand. They were ready to attack as soon as Li Qing gave the order. Although there were officials in the Tongzhou prefecture, due to the special nature of Wei prefecture, they were only civil officials sent by the Northern Yan court to deal with ordinary people's affairs. The officials didn't care about the big clans in the Tongzhou prefecture. Even the order of the martial artists in the Tongzhou prefecture was maintained by the Shun clan, such as patrolling the streets. Shenrong had already made arrangements. The streets were very clean in the early hours of the morning. No one would come to disturb the Li clan. Just as Li Cheng and Li Yun were about to make their move, Li Zhe appeared in front of them and said, "Big brother, second brother, I'm also a member of the Li family. Bring me along for this operation." Li Yun glanced at him and said, "What can you do with your current strength? Don't cause trouble. Go back to sleep." Li Zhe lowered his head and said, "I just want to do my part in avenging third brother and Uncle Zhong." Li Yun still wanted to reprimand him, but Li Cheng thought for a moment and said, "All right, if you want to come, then come with us. You stay in the clan, I still need to send some people to protect you. But remember, when you attack later, don't be too far away from me. This time, we're going to kill people, not play." Li Zhe quickly said, "Thank you, big brother." Li Yun curled his lips and didn't say anything. However, Li Cheng's words made sense. Since he was staying in the Li clan, he would have to leave some people here to protect him. It would be better to attack together. But at that moment, neither Li Cheng nor Li Yun noticed the vicious look in Li Zhe's eyes. When the time was up, Li Cheng waved his hand, and about 300 of the Li clan's true elites left the Li clan with Li Cheng. They sped along the quiet long street, adding a sense of solemnity to the atmosphere. At the same time, in the courtyard where Chu Xiu was staying, Ma Kuo's men were fiddling with some bows and crossbows, waiting for the Li clan to arrive. The people in the restaurant had already been sent away by Chu Xiu. This time, there would be a lot of casualties, and the ordinary people would only be a hindrance. Ma Kuo pulled a strong bow and threw it to the side. Light as a feather, far worse than the bows of my Chilean iron cavalry. Chu Xiu poured himself a cup of yellow wine and slowly sipped it. Be content. Only the imperial court often uses bows and crossbows. Very few people in the martial world use them. I found these bows and crossbows from the Chu clan's weapon shop. They've been made for a long time, but not many of them have been sold. By the way, were the 36 northern bandits very good at crossbows? Ma Kuo shook his head. Of course not. Before the 36 northern bandits formed an alliance, they fought for themselves, and each had their own specialties. Pang, who used to be from the northern Yan army. After he built his stronghold in the Chilean mountains, he taught us how to ride and use bows and arrows. That's why the outside world calls us the Chilean Iron Cavalry. Chu Xiu nodded in understanding. The world of the martial world was so vast. He could remember some of the plot, but not all of the people and things. Moreover, he was no longer in a game, but in the real world. In the game, one sentence was enough to describe a person, but in the real world, people were the most complicated. For example, Pang Hu, the red-faced heavenly king of the 36 northern bandits, was from the northern Yan army. At that moment, Chu Xiu's ears twitched. There was a commotion outside. Chu Xiu's eyes lit up. They're here. Get ready. Outside the courtyard, Li Cheng and his men surrounded Chu Xiu's courtyard. He called 2 men over and said, "Go in and test the waters." Li Yun unsheathed his sword and said coldly, "What's the point of testing? Just charge in and kill Chu Xiu. There are only a few dozen of them. What can they do?" Just as Li Cheng was about to say something, the door to the courtyard was suddenly pushed open. Chu Xiu and Ma Kuo walked out leisurely. "Young Master Li, you're right. If you want to kill someone, just do it. What's the point of testing?" Seeing Chu Xiu, Li Cheng and Li Yun's eyes turned bloodshot. Killing intent flashed in their eyes. Chu Xiu had killed their third brother, but this was the first time they had seen Chu Xiu in person. Li Cheng was still bewildered. Looking at Chu Xiu's appearance, he seemed to have long known that they were coming. Otherwise, why would he be dressed so neatly in the middle of the night and still be so calm when he saw them? Li Yun didn't think as much as Li Cheng. He just shouted at Chu Xiu with bloodshot eyes, "Chu Xiu, my third brother only touched a batch of your ores. Why did you have to be so ruthless? You even killed him and Uncle Zhong." Chu Xiu's face showed a hint of disdain. "Young Master Li, is this your first day in the Jianghu? How naive. In the desolate lands of the Western Pole, people would kill each other for a steamed bun, let alone Li Zhao, who touched a batch of ores worth tens of thousands of silver taels. Of course, these are all secondary reasons. According to my original plan, I would have killed Li Zhao and that old housekeeper of your Li family. Then my Chu family would have been able to destroy your Li family. Unfortunately, my plan was stopped by my own father." Li Yun and Li Cheng felt a chill run down their spines. Only now did they realize how vicious Chu Xiu's plan was. His goal wasn't the ores, but the entire Li family. If it wasn't for Chu Zongguang disagreeing and suppressing this matter, their Li family might have already been exterminated. Li Yun sneered and said, "It's a pity. My Li family will still exist, but you, Chu Xiu, will have to die. Don't you find it strange that our Li family made such a big move, but your Chu family didn't notice a single person? Don't worry, no one from the Chu family will appear on this street tonight. At most, they will come to collect your corpse tomorrow morning. Family infighting, brothers quarreling. Today your death, Chu Xiu, will be just as laughable. Although you will die at the hands of my Li family, your Chu family's contribution is also undeniable." At this time, Chu Xiu's face suddenly revealed a strange smile. "Family infighting? Brothers quarreling? I don't know if I'll die or not, but your Li family will definitely die first." Before Li Yun could react, Li Cheng suddenly felt that something was wrong. A sense of danger came from behind him. He unsheathed his sword and stabbed out like rain. With two clanging sounds, a few iron awls were cut down by him. However, one of the iron awls directly pierced into his abdomen, causing Li Cheng to clutch his stomach. His face was filled with disbelief as he looked at Li Zhe, who was holding a hidden weapon and had a twisted expression on his face. Li Cheng shouted in a hoarse voice, "Why? You actually joined hands with Chu Xiu? Although you are a concubine, you are still a direct descendant of my Li family." Li Zhe's face was full of malice. "I also count as a direct descendant of the Li family? When did you three brothers treat me as a member of the Li family? Ever since I was young, all the good things have belonged to the three of you. In the Li family, I was like an invisible person with no power at all. The outside world only knows that the Li family has 3 tigers. How many people actually remember that the Li family actually has 4 sons?" Raising his hand and waving the hidden weapon in his hand, Li Zhe laughed coldly. "Do you remember this? The Tang sect's hidden weapon, the soul-stealing awl. Back when we were still young, my father bought 3 of them. The 3 of you each had one to protect yourselves. Only I didn't have one." Li Cheng said in a hoarse voice, "You weren't even 10 years old at that time. You didn't even leave the house. How could you use this thing? Furthermore, this soul-stealing awl was something I gave you later, and now you're using it to hurt me." Li Zhe's expression froze for a moment, but then he laughed coldly. "You're just putting on an act. This soul-stealing awl can at most injure blood condensation martial artists, and that's only if it's a sneak attack. When you gave me the soul-stealing awl, you were already in the blood condensation realm. This thing is basically useless to you. Using a useless thing to show your generosity in front of your father? That's a good idea." A trace of coldness appeared in Li Cheng's eyes as he said, "Good, good, good. Very good. I didn't think that my Li family would raise an ingrate after more than 10 years. If I had known this would happen, I would have crippled you when my father passed away." Li Zhe laughed coldly. "Cripple me? You should worry about yourself right now. The soul-stealing awl originally didn't have any poison, but I added the sap of a poisonous vine from the south. Anyone below the Xiantian realm will die if they touch it." Chapter 34. Chu Xiu had said that the Li family was made up of 3 tigers and 1 tiger. Li Zhe was indeed a vicious person. He knew that he was weak. Even if he attacked from behind, the soul stealer all might not be able to kill Li Cheng. That was why he had secretly poisoned it. Li Cheng's complexion immediately changed when he heard this. He hurriedly tried to circulate his true qi, but it was already too late. The more he circulated his true qi, the faster the poison circulated. In an instant, he spat out a mouthful of black blood and fell to the ground. Chu Xiu clapped his hands from behind and said with a smile, "Wonderful. This is really wonderful. Young Master Li, now you know what it means to fight among brothers, right? Sneak attacks and stabbing each other face to face. This is much more intense than the fights in the Chu family." Li Yun's eyes suddenly turned red. He seemed to have realized what was going on. However, he was so angry that he ignored Chu Xiu and rushed towards Li Zhe. "Bastard! I will kill you!" Li Zhe waved his hand. More than 10 people from the Li family stood up to stop Li Yun. Although Li Zhe didn't seem to have any power over the past few years, he was still a direct descendant of the Li family. Using this identity, he had managed to win over a group of loyal servants in the Li family. However, there were only a dozen people in front of him, a pitifully small number. Chu Xiu sneered and waved his hand. More than 10 bandits rushed out from the courtyard. They held bows and arrows in their hands. After a few rounds, many people from the Li family were hit. Only then did they remember to use their weapons to block the arrows. However, Ma Kuo's bandits were the elites of the 36 northern bandits. They had once fought against the northern Yan kingdom's army. Although the Li family had a lot of people, they were no match for these bandits. After a round of shooting, more than 10 bandits who were better at archery stayed where they were. The rest of the bandits followed Ma Kuo to kill the people from the Li family. Chu Xiu pulled out his goose feather knife and walked towards Li Yun step by step. After killing several of Li Zhe's guards, Li Yun suddenly turned around and glared at Chu Xiu. His eyes were bloodshot, as if he wanted to eat someone alive. The instigator of all this was Chu Xiu. Without Chu Xiu, no matter how sinister Li Zhe was, he was just a venomous snake that only dared to hide in the dark. As long as he dared to show his face, he would definitely have his fangs pulled out by the two brothers. And this Chu Xiu was like a vicious wolf. His first bite was to tear off a piece of flesh from the Li family, and then he would completely swallow the Li family. Die! Li Yun let out a loud roar. His sword light flowed and his sword momentum was like a torrential downpour as it slashed towards Chu Xiu. The Li family's drizzle sword technique emphasized on continuous sword momentum, but now that it was being used by the furious Li Yun, it was less faintly discernible and more berserk, like a torrential storm. But as violent as he was, Chu Xiu was even more violent. The goose feather knife slashed down with a loud rumble. True qi condensed in his arms. This slash was only the simplest move, Huashan Mountain, but it completely shattered the complicated sword momentum. Li Yun's hand that was holding the sword immediately went numb. The sound of the sword clashing rang out, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. The long sword in his hand had even been nicked by Chu Xiu's slash. The goose feather knife in Chu Xiu's hand was not dyed with blood, but there was already a trace of blood on the edge of the knife. The blood knife was used by that sinister and evil knife technique. Under the continuous slashes, Li Yun was forced to retreat step by step, barely able to block. At this time, in Li Yun's mind, his anger had already been dispersed by shock. This Chu Xiu had clearly just stepped into the blood condensation realm. How could his strength be so great? If this continued, he wouldn't even have the slightest ability to counterattack. A trace of hesitation flashed in Li Yun's eyes. His big brother and third brother were already dead. If he continued to fight like this, it was possible that even he would die here. Only with his life could he take revenge. Without his life, there would be nothing left. Li Yun already had a trace of intention to retreat. He planned to make a feint and then retreat. But at this moment, Chu Xiu's knife slashed out, directly cutting the long sword in his hand in two. Only now did he notice that each of Chu Xiu's previous slashes were not just simple attacks. Each slash had landed on the same spot on his long sword. In the end, his long sword had been directly cut in two. A blood-colored knife light streaked past Li Yun's eyes. His head fell to the ground. Li Yun didn't have any more time to think. Following Li Yun's death, the rest of the Li family members completely collapsed and scattered in all directions. Some of them were members of the Li family, but most of them were just servants of the Li family. Although they had stayed in the Li family for their entire lives and could be considered loyal, the problem was that the Li family members were all dead. Why would they still risk their lives for the Li family? Looking at the ground littered with corpses, Chu Xiu stood at the center of the slaughter. He could smell the dense smell of blood. Ordinary people would feel disgusted, but Chu Xiu faintly felt a kind of excitement that came from deep within his bones. He didn't like killing. He just liked this kind of carefree feeling. In his previous life, Chu Xiu had also come from a large family. In fact, it was even larger than a small family like the Chu family. But he had endured silently for half his life. On the surface, he had pretended to be a hedonistic young master. But in the end, he had still been plotted against and killed. In this life, Chu Xiu didn't want to repeat the events of his previous life. In this life, he would take the initiative and take everything into his own hands. As for the bloody slaughter, Chu Xiu didn't care about it at all. Just like what Chu Xiu had said to Li Yun before, how could there be no one who didn't die in the underworld? From the moment you stepped into the underworld, you had to be prepared to kill or be killed. At this time, the surrounding battles were almost over. The people of the Li family were either dead or had fled. They were completely defeated. Li Yun was killed by Chu Xiu. As for Li Cheng, he had long since died from the poison. Li Zhe stood in the middle of the crowd. His face was pale, and he even felt like vomiting. Although he was ruthless, this was the first time he had killed someone. Moreover, the person he killed was his big brother. But soon after, Li Zhe laughed maniacally. The so-called three tigers of the Li family were already dead. The Li family was now his. Chu Xiu walked to Li Zhe's side and said lightly, "Are you very happy?" Li Zhe smiled and said, "From now on, the Li family is mine." "Of course I'm happy. Young Master Chu Xiu, I already said that it was a wise decision for you to cooperate with me. How about it, am I right? Without me, it wouldn't have been so easy for you to deal with the Li family." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Yes, it was a very wise decision." As his voice fell, Chu Xiu directly stabbed the knife into Li Zhe's stomach. This action caused the surrounding people to be stunned. Li Zhe's body was hunched, and he looked at Chu Xiu in disbelief. "Why? Why?" Chu Xiu whispered into Li Zhe's ear. "Why? Because my appetite is bigger than you can imagine. You are willing to give me half of the Li family, but I want the entire Li family. It was a wise decision for me to cooperate with you, but it wasn't a wise decision for you to cooperate with me. Finally, let me teach you a lesson. No matter how vicious your methods are, no matter how much you endure, it's all based on your own strength. If you don't even have the strength to protect yourself, how are you going to fight against others? Remember this lesson, and don't make the same mistake in your next life." Pulling out the knife, Li Zhe fell to the ground with unwillingness in his eyes. Chu Xiu said to Ma Kuo, "What are you waiting for? Clean up the rest of them." Only then did Ma Kuo react, and he immediately ordered his men to kill the people around Li Zhe. Looking at Li Zhe's body on the ground, Ma Kuo couldn't help but shake his head and say, "This kid is really unlucky. He plotted and endured for so many years, but in the end, it was all your fault." Chu Xiu flicked the blood off the knife and said, "He wasn't unlucky. He just didn't see himself clearly." Whether it was a vicious scheme or an overt plot, it all depends on strength. He was ruthless enough, cruel enough, and patient enough. Unfortunately, he neglected his strength. If I hadn't killed him, he wouldn't have been able to protect the Li family. Speaking of which, when Chu Xiu first arrived in this world, he was quite similar to Li Zhe. But what was Chu Xiu doing back then? The first thing he did when he returned to the Chu family was practice his knife skills. In such a short period of time, he had mastered the Azure Dragon sleeve to the point where it was almost self-torture. But what about Li Zhe? Over the past decade or so, even though the brothers of the Li family had ostracized him, they didn't deliberately oppress him like the Chu family did. They provided him with a lot of resources and food, but Li Zhe's level of cultivation was pitifully low. It wasn't hard to imagine what he had been doing all these years. He probably didn't have much time to cultivate. Instead, he spent all his time scheming and winning over the servants of the Li family. Chu Xiu said to Ma Kuo, "Ignore the bodies on the ground. Go straight to the Kaishan martial arts school." Ma Kuo raised his eyebrows and said, "You're going to make a move on Ding Kaishan? He's your second mother's father. No matter what, he's still a relative of the Chu family." A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. Relative? Not very soon. If Ding Kaishan hadn't taken the lead in this matter, how could the Chu family have cooperated so well? This is a good opportunity to kill him. I'll explain it to the Chu family. Ma Kuo shrugged. Since Chu Xiu had already made his decision, he would be in charge of killing. After entering the blood condensation realm, Chu Xiu's strength had increased to a frightening degree. For ordinary people, when they entered the blood condensation realm from the tempered body stage, their strength would increase by a large amount, but that was only a small amount. But Chu Xiu's strength had practically doubled. Back then, Ding Kaishan had been able to easily block Chu Xiu's blade, but now it wouldn't be so easy. Chapter 35. In the wee hours of the morning, Ding Kaishan was still sleeping in the martial arts club. There were many disciples in the Kaishan martial arts club during the day, numbering more than 100. However, there were only a few at night. Although Ding Kaishan was from the martial arts club and had countless disciples, there were still differences between disciples. For example, the disciples who came to his martial arts club during the day would only be taught some ordinary martial arts. He would teach them if they were paid, but if they didn't have the money, they would be kicked out. Ding Kaishan wouldn't even teach them ordinary internal energy, let alone the gold-splitting hand that he was famous for. These disciples who stayed in the Kaishan martial arts club all year round were Ding Kaishan's true disciples, the kind that could be regarded as his successors. Although Ding Kaishan knew that the Li family would make a move against Chu Xiu tonight, He didn't care. He was only responsible for acting as the middleman. If the Li family couldn't kill Chu Xiu with their strength, then there was no need for the Li family to continue standing in the Tong State Prefecture. Therefore, at night, Ding Kaishan rested as usual. He was old and his life was very regular. Otherwise, his strength would decline even faster. Outside the opening mountain dojo, Chu Xiu knocked on the door. After a long while, a disciple of Ding Kaishan walked over while cursing. As he opened the door, he muttered, "Mother f***, can't you let me rest?" As soon as the door opened, he saw a sharp flash of a knife. In an instant, his head fell to the ground, and the sound was extremely ear-piercing. Chu Xiu brought Ma Kuo and the others in. No matter how deep Ding Kaishan slept, he would be awakened. He hurriedly put on his clothes and walked out. Seeing Chu Xiu and his disciple's corpse on the ground, Ding Kaishan's expression suddenly changed. At this hour, the Li family should have made their move. Why was Chu Xiu still standing here? Why had he come to his Kaishan martial arts club with a knife? At this moment, Ding Kaishan realized that something had happened. However, he still calmed down and snorted coldly. "Chu Xiu, what is the meaning of this? Coming to my opening mountain martial arts school to kill people, could it be that you're not afraid of being punished when you return to the Chu family? Don't forget who I am. According to seniority, I am your elder." Chu Xiu walked over with a saber in his hand. As he walked, he said in a cold voice, "Elder? An elder who wants to kill me? Old thing, I don't care if you want to support your grandson to the position of patriarch, but since you're in my way, you can go to hell." As the saber slashed down, the blade whistled. A trace of blood-red light appeared in Chu Xiu's saber. After several battles, Chu Xiu had already used the blood saber scripture to the point of perfection. Ding Kaishan's eyes revealed a trace of anger. "How arrogant! Do you really think that you're invincible after learning martial arts for a few days?" Although Ding Kaishan was flabbergasted that Chu Xiu had reached blood condensation at such a young age, he could be considered a senior of Jianghu. He had trained his entire life, and the only reason he hadn't advanced to Xiantian was because he was too old. But now a junior was arrogant enough to want to kill him. He really didn't know what was good for him. As soon as he finished speaking, Ding Kaishan directly used his golden splitting hand. His originally white hands that had a hint of red instantly expanded, becoming a terrifying jet black, as if they were a monster. Ding Kaishan's golden splitting hand was a type of iron palm, but it was a bit higher level. Ordinary iron palm only used external force to refine a pair of palms, and at most some medicinal herbs were used to supplement it. But Ding Kaishan's golden splitting hand was different. It needed to be cultivated in conjunction with internal force. During the body-tempering realm, it was similar to the iron palm, but the medicinal herbs used were of a higher level. But once one reached blood condensation, they would be able to control their body's blood qi. They would need to channel all their blood qi into their hands, and then continuously temper it with internal force. That would cause the golden splitting hand's blood qi to be astonishing, and just their palms would be able to shatter metal. Chu Xiu's blood saber technique was sinister and ruthless, but Ding Kaishan's attacks were incomparably steady. He directly used his palms to block Chu Xiu's goose feather saber, and a sonorous sound rang out from the collision. Ding Kaishan's strength was actually not the slightest bit inferior to Chu Xiu's. His jet black hand directly clamped down on Chu Xiu's goose feather saber. Ding Kaishan coldly laughed. "You think that just because you were able to kill that Li Zhong from the Li family, you can kill me? That Li Zhong suffered internal injuries in his early years, and I'm guessing he still hasn't fully recovered. After killing a half-crippled blood condensation cultivator, you don't know what's good for you? Laughable." Suddenly, a murderous intent burst out from Chu Xiu's eyes. He abandoned his saber and stepped forward. Suddenly, a silver saber light attacked. Azure Dragon Sleeve. The saber attack was like an azure dragon emerging from the sea. Its speed was extremely fast, and only when Chu Xiu's saber light appeared in front of Ding Kaishan did he react. He hastily sent out a palm to meet the saber. However, Chu Xiu's saber suddenly deviated from its original position. The saber light streaked past, and Ding Kaishan's right hand was directly cut off at the wrist by Chu Xiu. that severed hand instantly sprayed out a large amount of blood. It was simply not the amount of blood that a severed hand could contain. From the start, Chu Xiu's saber had never intended to kill Ding Kaishan. He had only wanted to cripple his opponent's golden rending hand. The Azure Dragon Sleeve wasn't meant to be used as a sure kill technique. Ding Kaishan painfully howled, and his figure retreated. However, Chu Xiu's saber light was like a maggot attached to a bone, sticking closely to Ding Kaishan. In the case of a severed hand, Ding Kaishan's figure was awkward, and he had no time to resist at all. In the end, Chu Xiu directly stabbed his saber into his chest, and he was directly killed. Drawing out his saber, Chu Xiu felt that Ding Kaishan's strength didn't seem to be as strong as he had imagined. He was even weaker than Li Zhong, the old housekeeper of the Li family. The power of Ding Kaishan's golden rending hand was too strong. In terms of strength alone, it was not inferior to Chu Xiu, who had practiced the Xiantian skill. But it was precisely because of this that he had devoted too much energy to how to practice this pair of golden rending hands. As a result, his martial arts could only be said to be sloppy and ordinary. Therefore, when he encountered Chu Xiu's sudden strange move, which directly crippled his golden rending hand, Ding Kaishan could only wait for death. Of course, the most important reason was not that Ding Kaishan was weak, but that the current Chu Xiu had become stronger than before. Cut off his head. Tomorrow I will send a big gift to the Chu family. Chu Xiu put away his saber and walked directly out. Ma Kuo was puzzled. Child Chu, where are you going? Without looking back, Chu Xiu said, It's still early. I'm going back to sleep. The next morning, the Tongzhou prefecture, which was usually peaceful, was very lively. Chu Xiu and the others didn't bother to clean up the corpses on the long street. Therefore, when people found the corpses, all the people in the Tongzhou prefecture knew that the elites of the Li family, which was originally one of the 3 big families in the Tongzhou prefecture, had all died here. Such a big thing couldn't be hidden from others. In less than 2 hours, the news had completely spread, and naturally, it had also spread to the ears of the Chu family. When Chu Zongguang heard the news, he was also stunned. Chu Zongguang hadn't thought of Chu Xiu yet. He subconsciously murmured, All the elites of the Li family are dead? Who did it? Housekeeper Chen whispered, I heard that they died in front of child Chu Xiu's courtyard. Chu Xiu? It's impossible for him and his subordinates to destroy the Li family. Chu Zongguang didn't believe such a ridiculous thing at all. Just when Housekeeper Chen was about to say something else, a servant of the Chu family came in and reported, Master, child Chu Xiu is here. He wants to convene the family for a meeting. He said that he has a gift for you. Chu Zongguang frowned slightly. Is it really him? At this time, in the Chu family's meeting hall, there were 4 boxes placed in front of Chu Xiu. He was drinking tea leisurely. First Madam, Chu Xiu, and a group of Chu family elders all looked confused. Obviously, they didn't understand what Chu Xiu was up to this time. Second Madam and Chu Sheng looked a little flustered. They didn't even dare to look at Chu Xiu. They really didn't understand what went wrong. Why was Chu Xiu still alive? Instead, the Li family's people were all dead. Could it be that there was someone behind him helping him? Before Second Madam and Chu Xiu could think too much, Chu Zongguang walked out and looked directly at Chu Xiu. He said in a deep voice, Did you do what happened to the Li family? Chu Xiu bowed to Chu Zongguang and said, Yes. Chu Zongguang coldly snorted. What did I tell you last time? Did you forget? I won't let you act against the Li family for the time being. Did you turn a deaf ear to my words? Chu Xiu had a helpless expression on his face. Father, I didn't want to provoke the Li family. But this time, it was the Li family who attacked me first. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to kill my way to the Li family and drag them to my residence. Chu Zongguang thought about it and felt that it was reasonable. The Li family had indeed gone too far. He had already let them go, but they still dared to cause trouble. Chu Zongguang frowned and said, Don't worry about this matter. I will make the Li family give you an explanation. Chu Xiu smiled and said, There's no need for an explanation. I have already asked the Li family for an explanation. After saying that, Chu Xiu opened the 3 boxes in front of him and said to everyone, These are the heads of the Li family's 3 brothers, Li Cheng, Li Yun, and Li Zhe. Right now, the entire Li family is like a group of dragons without a leader. Even a few branch families can't be found. The entire Li family has been completely destroyed. I have already sent my subordinates to take over the Li family's business. From now on, there will only be 2 great families in the Tongzhou prefecture. Chapter 36. When Chu Xiu placed the heads of the 3 Li brothers in front of the Chu family, everyone was shocked, even Chu Zongguang. Because Chu Xiu had chopped off the heads, the people outside did not know that the Li family's direct descendants had died at the hands of Chu Xiu. They thought that only some of the Li family's elites had died. Now that they saw the 3 heads, they realized that the Li family had really been destroyed by Chu Xiu. This kind of fantasy story was placed in front of everyone, making them feel that it was inconceivable. Chu Xiu cupped his hands towards the people present and said, "Father, elders, the Li family has too many properties. Although my subordinates have gone to take over, it is certainly not enough to manage them all. Therefore, this child is willing to take out 2/3 of the Li family's properties and ask the family to send people to manage them." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, whether it was Chu Zongguang or the Chu family's elders, they nodded in satisfaction. The children of the Chu family's elders were the stewards of the Chu family. Now that the Li family had been annexed, although the Chu family would benefit from it, wouldn't those places be managed by their children? Chu Zongguang was very satisfied with Chu Xiu's current attitude. Previously, Chu Xiu had repeatedly disobeyed his orders, which made Chu Zongguang very angry. This time, Chu Xiu was finally a bit more sensible. At this time, Chu Zongguang suddenly asked, "You have a box, what's inside?" Chu Xiu opened the box with a smile. Impressively, it was Ding Kaishan's head. The moment she saw the head, the second madam suddenly wailed and cried, "Father!" Chu Zongguang's complexion suddenly became gloomy. He had thought that Chu Xiu's temperament had changed, and finally knew what it meant to obey the rules. He didn't expect that Chu Xiu would immediately give him a slap. Who was Ding Kaishan? He was his father-in-law, and his son, Chu Xiu, was his son. His own son killed his father-in-law. This was simply a joke. "Chu Xiu, what the hell do you want?" Chu Zongguang smashed the table in anger. Chu Xiu said calmly, "Father, Ding Kaishan and our Chu family are in-laws, but he betrayed us and colluded with the Li family. Shouldn't he be killed?" Hearing this, the second madam immediately grabbed Chu Zongguang's hand and wailed, "Master! Even if my father didn't make any contributions to the Chu family, he did a lot of hard work, but he was killed by that little bastard Chu Xiu. You have to help me." Looking at the second madam, Chu Xiu sneered, "Hard work? All these years, my Chu family has given Ding Kaishan a lot of things, but what's the result? In exchange, he colluded with the Li family and betrayed the interests of the Chu family. This time, I was surrounded by people from the Li family. I don't want to talk about why I didn't receive any news in advance. Last time, Ding Kaishan took 57,000 jin of or from my Chu family, but in the end he said 52,000 jin. What about the rest? He directly swallowed it. He harmed the interests of my Chu family, so shouldn't he be killed? Speaking of which, it was laughable. Ding Kaishan's biggest crime was actually colluding with outsiders to kill Chu Xiu, but this crime couldn't be said openly. Chu Xiu could only say that Ding Kaishan secretly harmed the interests of the Chu family. But the problem was that if he didn't kill Ding Kaishan today, then even if he revealed this matter, Ding Kaishan wouldn't die. Therefore, Chu Xiu could only choose to kill Ding Kaishan first, and then use this crime to make a reasonable explanation for his actions. The second madam pointed at Chu Xiu and shouted, "Nonsense! How could my father do such a thing?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "If you don't believe me, you can go check the Chu family's accounts. When I robbed and killed the Li family's caravan, I found 57,000 jin of ore, all of which were produced by my Chu family's Nanshan mining area. They were all verified by the Chu family steward. Also, Lord Father, why don't you ask the steward who sent the ore to Kaishan martial arts school whether he changed the accounts?" Chu Zongguang frowned, and immediately asked people to ask those stewards. The Chu family's direction had changed, and the steward who had experienced this matter also knew that something was wrong. He didn't dare to hide the truth, and immediately told the truth to Chu Zongguang. The second madam's face was dull. She really didn't know about this matter. She didn't expect that Ding Kaishan would play tricks on her. If Ding Kaishan really needed money, he could just tell her directly. As his daughter, how could she not give him money? But in the end, Ding Kaishan just had to plot in secret, and even his own life was included in the scheme. Chu Zongguang's eyes revealed a trace of anger. Chu Xiu's act of killing first and reporting later really made Chu Zongguang very angry. But what made Chu Zongguang even more angry was that the second madam secretly played some tricks, and even did not hesitate to harm the Chu family's interests. Come, bring second madam to rest. Second madam has been grieving too much, and it's not suitable for her to go out in the near future. Chu Zongguang's meaning was very clear. Whether Ding Kaishan's matter was good or bad, he wouldn't make a conclusion. But it was very clear that in the future, second madam wouldn't even be able to leave her courtyard. When Chu Zongguang's gaze turned to Chu Xing hastily said, "Father, listen to me. I really didn't know about any of this." Chu Xing probably didn't even believe his own words, let alone Chu Zongguang. In the past, Chu Zongguang had felt that Chu Xing was pretty good among his sons. At least he understood the rules, but now he loathed him even more. Chu Zongguang waved his hand and coldly said, "Shut up. These past few years, you've only known how to plot in secret, and you've even neglected your martial arts. My Chu family is a martial family, and we don't have any strength. If the family head position was given to you, would you be able to sit stably? Right now, your eldest brother and second brother have already stepped into the blood condensation realm. Only you're still in the body tempering realm. In the future, you don't need to worry about the Chu family's business. Just stay in your courtyard and accompany your mother, peacefully cultivating." Chu Xing's face immediately became incomparably pale. Chu Zongguang's words were already very clear. From today onwards, he had already lost the qualifications to become the Chu family's successor. Once the servants pulled away the mother and son, Chu Zongguang rubbed his head, feeling a bit of a headache. "Uncles and housekeeper Chen, send some people to take over the Li family's business. The rest of you can leave. As for Chu Xiu, this is my final warning to you. Next time you make a move, you must first report to me. Otherwise, I'll take back all your business and send you to the ancestral hall to reflect on your actions." Originally, exterminating the Li family should have been a happy matter, but Chu Zongguang felt a headache coming on from all these troublesome matters. Chu Xiu respectfully cupped his hands towards Chu Zongguang. "I understand, Lord Father." To Chu Xiu, his goal had already been achieved. The Li family had been exterminated, and his prestige in the Chu family was unrivaled. He had also conveniently gotten rid of the mother and son, and he hadn't been punished by Chu Zongguang. Of course, the most important thing was that Chu Xiu had obtained a third of the Li family's business. Right now, Chu Xiu was lacking money and resources. A third of the Li family's business was enough for Chu Xiu to digest for a while. As for handing over a third of the Li family's business, Chu Xiu was also very helpless. If they didn't hand it over, he wouldn't be able to swallow the entire Li family. If he didn't feed the rest of the Chu family, would it be so easy for them to let Chu Xiu obtain those things? After returning to his courtyard, Gao Bei excitedly said to Chu Xiu, "Young master, this time we've really struck it rich. Not counting those properties, the Li family's total assets have already surpassed 1,000,000 taels of silver." When Chu Xiu heard this, he frowned and said, "What? Such a big Li family that has been rooted in the Tongzhou prefecture for more than 100 years, not counting properties and other fixed assets, their assets are only 1,000,000 taels of silver?" Gao Bei smiled bitterly and said, "Young master, this is already more than enough. When the Li family's old patriarch passed away, the people of the Li family became dispirited. Many servants left, and the Li family paid a huge price to keep the people of the Li family. Also, the Li family's main business is blacksmithing, but these businesses are in Yan country's Qingyuan town, so I didn't count them." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "All right, we'll take a third of the Li family's things, and the rest will be given to the family. Remember, the cultivation resources have priority. Gao Bei nodded. He wasn't suited for doing big things, but he was still very nimble when it came to small things. He and the Chu family steward spent almost a day calculating the accounts and delivered all the cultivation resources that Chu Xiu wanted to Chu Xiu. The Li family's current foundation couldn't even compare to the Chu family's. They didn't even have a single alchemist, and all of their medicinal pills were bought from outside. Things like qi replenishing pills and blood condensing pills were no longer of much use to Chu Xiu, who had already reached the blood condensation realm. What really made Chu Xiu's eyes light up was that the Li family actually had 3 bottles of jasper pills. The jasper pill was a medicinal pill refined from a few precious medicinal herbs that were abundant in the Yan country. It was shaped like jasper, so it was called the jasper pill. It had the effect of nourishing one's true qi and cleansing the body. Only a few large sects in the Yan country had the ability to refine it, and each one was worth several hundred taels of silver. Moreover, ordinary people couldn't even buy one. These 3 bottles of jasper pills were probably specially bought by the Li family from the Yan country for Li Cheng and the others to use, but now they had fallen into Chu Xiu's hands. Taking out several jasper pills in succession, Chu Xiu circulated the Xiantian art to refine the pill's energy. This was the benefit of a high-grade cultivation technique. Ordinary people would not dare to swallow it in one go like Chu Xiu, swallowing several pills in a row. Chapter 37. The step from the blood condensation realm to the Xiantian realm was a small bottleneck. Without enough resources and talent, it would not be so easy to cross. Body tempering was to refine the muscles and bones of the body, blood condensation was to refine one's blood and qi, and Xiantian was to combine these two into one, completely refining the body and reaching the Xiantian realm without a trace of impurities. Body tempering and blood condensation could only be regarded as ordinary people of the Jianghu. Only when one reached the Xiantian realm, although they could not be regarded as experts in the Jianghu, at least they could be seen in public. Even in a small place like the Tongzhou prefecture, Chu Zongguang, a Xiantian realm martial artist, was able to establish a family. One could imagine what this realm represented. Those with talent naturally did not need to worry about this realm, but those without talent could only rely on comprehension and perseverance to struggle. After practicing martial arts for such a long time, Chu Xiu could see that his talent could only be said to be ordinary, almost the same as the Li family's brothers. His only advantage was the Xiantian skill. This skill could be regarded as improving Chu Xiu's foundation, making his foundation incomparably solid. At the same time, his own cultivation speed became faster than the martial artists of the same level. Of course, his speed was only compared to ordinary martial artists. Compared to those real geniuses, it was estimated that it was still not enough. So now Chu Xiu was very puzzled. His body had become the sect leader of the evil sect, who brought disaster to the Jianghu. What kind of opportunity did he obtain in his previous life to actually reach such a position? These things Chu Xiu just thought about it, and did not continue to pursue further. In the Jianghu, only absolute strength was the most important. Just like what he said before about Li Zhe, his strength was not enough, even if he was full of schemes. In the end, he could only make a wedding dress for others. Of course, Chu Xiu would not make this kind of mistake. Now that he had obtained the jasper pill, Chu Xiu immediately began to seclude himself to cultivate. The changes in the Tongzhou prefecture could not be felt by ordinary people, but for the martial artists of the Jianghu, these 2 days had set off a storm in the Tongzhou prefecture. The Li family, which had been rooted in Tongzhou prefecture for 100 years, had actually been exterminated. Moreover, it was done by the second son of the Chu family alone. This was something that they could not believe. Therefore, most people believed that the Chu clan was helping Chu Xiu. There were even some people who believed that Chu Zongguang was preparing to let Chu Xiu take over the position of clan head and deliberately arranged for him to take credit. After hearing this rumor, the people of the Chu family didn't know what to say. They knew how Chu Zongguang treated Chu Xiu. Moreover, the most bizarre thing was that the opening mountain martial school's Ding Kaishan was also killed. This made them somewhat unable to see through it. All kinds of rumors spread everywhere, But the Chu family did not care. In any case, they would disperse in 2 days. In fact, this was indeed the case. Half a month later, no one on the streets discussed this matter anymore. Half a month later, Chu Xiu came out from his closed-door training. He had already refined 1 bottle of Jasper pills, but he did not touch the other 2 bottles for the time being. Closed-door training also needed to be done step by step. After refining an entire bottle of Jasper pills, he needed to rest for a while to digest. After practicing in the courtyard for a while, Chu Xiu's blood and qi surged. A warm current rose from his body. He could already feel that his true qi had strengthened a lot. Compared to when he first started cultivating, his true qi was like a small stream compared to a large river. Ma Kuo opened the courtyard door and walked in. Seeing Chu Xiu practicing his saber, he laughed and said, "Young Master Chu, have you come out of seclusion? Your cultivation has improved again." Chu Xiu looked at Ma Kuo and said, "You're not bad either. Looking at you, you should be about to step into the blood condensation realm, right?" Ma Kuo casually cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu and said, "It's all thanks to young Master Chu's good fortune. Here, I eat well, sleep well, and have a supply of medicinal pills. The blood condensation realm is only a matter of time. I reckon that by the time I return to the stronghold, Feng Yidao and the others will be regretting their decision. Why didn't young Master Chu look for them back then?" After Chu Xiu stepped into the blood condensation realm, the blood condensation pills were no longer of any use to him. That was why Chu Xiu gave all the blood condensation pills to Ma Kuo, and Ma Kuo's strength had improved greatly. After chatting with Chu Xiu for a while, Ma Kuo suddenly said, "By the way, young Master Chu Xiu, 3 experts have come to the Tong province recently. They are staying in your Chu family's inn, and they are all very strange." "Experts? How strong are they?" "I can't tell the specifics, but they are definitely above the Xiantian realm," Ma Kuo said in a low voice. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. If they were all above the Xiantian realm, then they could really be considered experts. There were 3 basic realms for martial arts: tempered body, blood condensation, and Xiantian. These 3 realms mainly trained the martial artist's physical body. Above the 3 realms was the 5 tiers of qi controlling. As the name suggested, the 5 tiers of qi controlling did not focus on the physical body, but on one's own true qi. The 5 tiers of qi controlling mainly focused on the cultivation of internal and external vigor, gathering the 3 flowers, concentrating the 5 qis, and oneness of heaven and man. The first tier, internal vigor, allowed one to use true qi to observe one's meridians. After mastering it, one's control over one's physical body would reach an extreme. The second tier, physical vigor, allowed one to refine true qi into vigor qi, which could be released to injure others. The shortest range was a few inches, and the longest range was dozens of feet. The sword aura and the saber aura were extremely powerful. The third tier, gathering the 3 flowers, allowed one to cultivate one's essence, qi, and spirit to the peak. With the 3 flowers at one's prominence, one's control over true qi would be greatly increased. The fourth tier, concentrating the 5 qis, trained the 5 qis in one's internal organs, gathered in the lower body's dantian, and rushed up to the top of the head sense ocean to reach the 5 qis unification realm. The fifth tier, oneness of heaven and man, trained one's physical body and true qi to the extreme, reaching the state of being both inside and out. With one's spirit as the guide and qi as the foundation, one could receive the power of heaven and earth. This was the true oneness of heaven and man. Only when one reached the 5th tier of the imperial qi realm would one be qualified to be called an expert in the Jianghu. Even though the Tongzhou prefecture was considered a large prefecture in Wei prefecture, it was sandwiched between the north and south Shangmang mountains. It was rather remote and usually, no experts would come here. This was because experts were not afraid of bandits. They could ride alone through the Shangmang mountains and did not need to pass through the Tongzhou prefecture. Now that 3 outsiders had suddenly appeared in Tongzhou prefecture, it would attract a lot of attention. However, Chu Xiu did not care. He said casually, maybe they're Eastern Qi or Northern Yen martial artists. They didn't want to rest in the barren mountains when they passed through Shangmang mountains, so they came to Tongzhou Prefecture to rest. Ma Kuo shook his head and said, "Definitely not. The reason I noticed them and said they were strange was because they were hiding their realms. If I hadn't followed Leader Pang back then and seen many masters, I probably wouldn't have noticed that they were all in the 5th tier of chi controlling. Also, these people are definitely not just passing by. I asked the innkeeper of the inn, and he said that they had booked rooms in the inn for a few days. During the day, they spread out and asked some low-level martial artists in Tongzhou Prefecture if there was a martial artist with the surname Jianghu from the Kingdom of Qi in Tongzhou Prefecture. Moreover, he cultivates a type of inner force that tends to be mediocre, but it focuses on accumulation. After mastering it, his inner force will be like a vast ocean. These people are interesting. The Wei Prefecture used to be the Wei Kingdom, and the Wei Kingdom was closer to the Kingdom of Qi. Before the Kingdom of Qi was destroyed, many martial artists from the Kingdom of Qi came here. Besides, the surname Zhang is a common surname, so people like him are as common as the hairs on a cow. As for the description of the inner force, it's so vague that it's impossible for those low-level martial artists to know. However, after Ma Kuo finished speaking, Chu Xiu was shocked. The martial art that the 3 people described was the Chu family's boundless sea mantra. However, the inner force was different from the moves, especially the Chu family's boundless sea mantra. It was mediocre and had no special characteristics. Moreover, it was only taught to direct descendants like Chu Xiu. Therefore, not many people in the Chu family knew the characteristics of the Chu family's inner force, let alone outsiders. Some people didn't even know the name of the Chu family's inner force. Chu Xiu was almost 90% sure that the inner force that the 3 people described was the boundless sea mantra. Moreover, Chu Xiu had also heard that the Chu family used to be in the Eastern Qi and moved to the Tongzhou Prefecture in the Wei Prefecture more than 20 years ago. However, Chu Zongguang did not come here alone. Instead, he brought the whole Chu family with him. Moreover, the Chu family had never changed its surname. It had always been Chu. This could be seen from the Chu family's ancestral hall and the elders. Adding all these coincidences together, Chu Xiu guessed that the 3 people were most likely here for the Chu family. He even couldn't help thinking in the direction of the Chu family's situation. After all, 3 martial artists in the 5th level of Qi-controlling realm could indeed cause a great change in the Chu family. "Take me to see the 3 martial artists," Chu Xiu said in a low voice. Seeing that there was something wrong with Chu Xiu's eyes, Ma Kuo vaguely guessed something, but he didn't ask. He just nodded and led Chu Xiu to the inn. Ma Kuo seemed to be a rough person, but in fact, he was a meticulous person. Otherwise, Chu Xiu wouldn't have specially picked Ma Kuo to help him. Chu Xiu followed Ma Kuo to the inn. The 2 of them found a table on the 2nd floor by the window and sat down. They waited until noon. Ma Kuo whispered to Chu Xiu, "Young Master Chu, they are the 3 people on the street." Chu Xiu followed Ma Kuo's gaze and saw 3 martial artists in coarse linen clothes walking toward the entrance of the inn. They were carrying bags on their backs. The 3 people looked ordinary, and there was nothing special about them. Even their cultivation was hidden to the extreme. If Ma Kuo hadn't reminded him, Chu Xiu would have thought that they were at most in the blood condensation realm. The only eye-catching thing about them was that one of them had a hideous whip mark on his face. It extended from the corner of his eyebrow to his chin and covered the entire right side of his face. This was caused by a golden iron whip. Although it had healed, it still left a hideous scar, which looked a little scary. If this person was really an expert in the 5th level of Qi-controlling realm, then who could whip an expert of this level? This could be said to be an insult. Chapter 38. Chu Xiu observed the 3 weirdos through the window, but they seemed to have noticed Chu Xiu's gaze. They glanced at him, and the light in their eyes even made Chu Xiu's eyes hurt. Chu Xiu quickly looked away and pretended to look at the scenery on the street. The 3 people didn't continue to pay attention to Chu Xiu. They walked directly into the inn and asked the innkeeper to prepare food for them and send it to their rooms. After a while, Chu Xiu whispered to Ma Kuo, "Send some brothers to stay in the inn for a long time and pay attention to their movements." but don't get too close. Ma Kuo nodded, and Chu Xiu left temporarily. Whether these people came for the Chu family or not, Chu Xiu didn't plan to contact them for the time being. His strength was limited. If they were really masters in the 5th level of the Qi-controlling realm, Chu Xiu would be courting death if he contacted them now and played any tricks. At this time, in the Shen family, Shen Rong, the chief steward of the Shen family, also felt very aggrieved. Before, he was waiting to take over half of the Li family's property with joy. He didn't expect that the Li family would be destroyed by Chu Xiu after it was over. The property that was in his hands was gone, which made Shen Rong curse the Li family in his heart. So many people couldn't even deal with Chu Xiu. To be honest, if the Li family hadn't come to talk to him about this, even if Shen Rong knew that Chu Xiu had destroyed the Li family, he would only be surprised at the strength of Chu Xiu and the level of the Li family's trash. But now the Li family had promised to give him half of the property, and now it was all gone, which made Shen Rong feel like the fat meat in his mouth was taken away. So during this time, Shen Rong's temper was very bad, which made the servants who served him tremble with fear. Everyone knew that in the Shen family, this master was more difficult to serve than the master. At this time, one of Shen Rong's trusted subordinates carefully served a cup of ginseng tea. Shen Rong took a sip and immediately spat it out. She scolded, "Do you have a heart? Such hot tea, are you trying to burn me to death?" The servant hurriedly said, "Master Rong, please don't be angry. I will go and get a new cup." Shen Rong threw the teacup to the side and coldly snorted, "All right, don't waste your energy. Damn it, it's all because of Chu Xiu that I can't do anything smoothly recently. I don't know what kind of dog shit luck he had to be able to destroy the Li family." Hearing this, the servant suddenly thought of something and said, "Master Rong, speaking of which, I think it's normal that Chu Xiu was able to destroy the Li family." Shen Rong sneered and said, "What do you know? How can you casually speculate about the war between the two families? It's enough for you to brag to your subordinates, but you still want to show off in front of I?" The servant smiled awkwardly and said, "Of course, I don't dare to show off in front of Master Rong. It's just that the strength of the bandits under Chu Xiu is really strong. Most of the Li family's servants haven't killed anyone before, so it's normal that they can't beat them." Hearing this, Shen Rong was shocked and quickly said, "The people under Chu Xiu are bandits? How can you be so sure?" The servant smiled awkwardly and said, "Because I was so poor that I couldn't eat, I became a bandit in Nanshangmang Mountain for a period of time. But Master Rong also knows that I don't have much courage. I only dared to hold a knife and shout from behind. I really haven't killed anyone before. The bandit boss I followed is called Lian Laosen. He's also a guy without any ability. He once took someone's silver to rob and kill Chu Xiu. In the end, he was killed by another group of bandits called Chu Xiu. The leader of that group of bandits is called Ma Kuo. If I hadn't run away quickly, I would definitely have been killed by them. But fortunately, they killed Lian Laosen, that short-lived guy. Because of that, I was able to join the Shen family and was chosen by Master Rong. Some time ago, when I was on the streets, I saw Chu Xiu walking on the streets with Ma Kuo. Later, I paid special attention to Chu Xiu's subordinates. Almost all of them are the same group of bandits that followed Ma Kuo." Hearing this, Shen Rong's eyes suddenly showed a trace of surprise. His strength and ability were average, but he was still a little scheming to be able to be the head housekeeper of the Shen family for so many years. When this servant mentioned Ma Kuo, it immediately made Shen Rong think of many things. The bandits of the southern Shangmang Mountains sought refuge with Chu Xiu. In the end, Chu Xiu reached an agreement with the bandits of the northern Shangmang Mountain on his first business trip. He led his caravan safely through the Shangmang Mountain. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? Everyone knew that the southern Shangmang Mountain and the northern Shangmang Mountain were connected. If Chu Xiu's subordinates were the bandits of the southern Shangmang Mountain, then he might have a deep relationship with the bandits of the northern Shangmang Mountain. Then, Chu Xiu's caravan was robbed by his younger brother, Chu Shang. Shen Rong also heard about this. He was fine when he left the Shangmang Mountain, but when his younger brother left, something happened. Although it seemed that Chu Shang was courting death on the surface, there were many suspicious points in this matter. Thinking of this, Shenrong suddenly revealed a trace of an unfathomable smile. He seemed to have found out about Chu Xiu's weakness. Taking out the agreement that Li Qing had written for him, Shenrong muttered, "Fortunately, I didn't tear it up at that time. Now it is useful." Turning around, Shenrong scolded the servant with a smile. "Why didn't you say this earlier?" The servant smiled awkwardly and said, "Being a bandit is not a glorious thing." At that time, Master Rong had not taken a fancy to this lowly one yet. "Of course, I wouldn't dare to talk nonsense in front of others." Shenrong laughed and said, "This time, you have made a great contribution. Come, follow me to see Chu Xiu. The Li family promised to give me half of their family business. This time, I must dig out 2/3 from Chu Xiu's hands." At this time, Chu Xiu was still practicing his saber in his courtyard. The sudden appearance of the three strange people gave Chu Xiu a sense of crisis. He was ready to observe whether the purpose of these three people was good or evil. However, regardless of good or evil, one's own strength was always the most important. For Chu Xiu, who was still not strong enough, everything was focused on increasing his strength. At this moment, Gao Bei suddenly knocked on the door and whispered, "Young master, the Shen family's Shenrong is here to visit." Chu Xiu stopped his saber and took a towel to wipe off the sweat on his forehead. He asked in surprise, "Shenrong? Who is that?" Gao Bei reacted. With Chu Xiu's previous status, he didn't seem to know this person. Gao Bei quickly said, "Shenrong is the Shen family's housekeeper. Even though his strength is weak and his ability is ordinary, but because the Shen family has already entered the Azure Water Sword sect, Shen Bai and the current Shen family's patriarch, Shen Mo, were all brought up by him. Therefore, Shenrong's status in the Shen family is extremely high. Even the patriarch has to be polite when he sees him." "Then why is he looking for me?" Chu Xiu was puzzled. Gao Bei shook his head. "This lowly one doesn't know. He only brought a servant over and said that he wants to see young master." Chu Xiu walked out with some doubts. Gao Bei arranged for him to be in a private room in the restaurant. After pushing the door open, Chu Xiu revealed a natural smile and cupped his hands. "Housekeeper Shin is a distinguished guest. I wonder what advice Housekeeper Shin has for me?" Facing Chu Xiu, Shenrong's attitude was arrogant and he didn't even stand up. He just glanced at Gao Bei, who was behind Chu Xiu, and said, "The matter that I want to tell you is somewhat important. It shouldn't fall into other people's ears." Chu Xiu slightly frowned, but he still let Gao Bei leave. After Gao Bei left, Shenrong took out a piece of paper and handed it to Chu Xiu. He said lightly, "Take a look." Chu Xiu took it and saw that it was an agreement written by Li Qing. After he killed him, Shenrong had to protect the Li family from the revenge of the Chu family, and the Li family had to give Shenrong half of their family business as a reward. In other words, the old man in front of him could be said to be the conspirator of the Li family to kill him, although they didn't succeed in the end. Now the Li family was dead. As long as Shenrong didn't take this thing out, no one would know. But now, Shenrong was openly showing this thing to him. What was the meaning of this? Was he humiliating him? Chu Xiu's face was livid. He slammed the paper on the table and said coldly, "Housekeeper Shen, what do you mean by this?" Shenrong said indifferently, "What I mean is very simple. The Li family promised to give me half of their family business, but in the end, an accident happened. You actually didn't die, and instead, you killed everyone from the Li family and annexed them. In this way, I didn't get what the Li family promised me. So now, these things will be given to you, Chu Xiu. But it's not half, it's 2/3. Chu Xiu was so angry that he laughed and said, "Housekeeper Shin, are you muddle-headed? You wanted to help the Li family kill me, but in the end, you didn't succeed. Instead, you opened your mouth and asked for things from me." Shenrong sneered and said, "Why? Because I know that you, Chu Xiu, colluded with the bandits of the Nanbei Shangmang Mountain, robbed and killed passing caravans, and even robbed and killed your Chu family's caravan, and crippled your own brother." Chapter 39. The moment Shenrong said this, Chu Xiu's face twitched slightly, but his heart was in turmoil. Colluding with bandits and killing people. Of course, Chu Xiu knew what kind of crime this was. This was a crime that could cost him his life. Chu Xiu maintained a calm expression on his face. He stood up and said coldly, "Butler Shin, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. I'm not crazy, how could I do such a crazy thing?" Shin Rong said lightly, "Yes, you're not crazy, but the things you, Chu Xiu, have done are crazy beyond imagination." As she said this, Shin Rong pointed to the servant behind him and said, "Wang Er, young Master Chu Xiu seems to have no impression of you. Say a few words and let young Master Chu Xiu remember." The servant called Wang Er stepped forward and chuckled, "Young Master Chu Xiu, I remember very clearly the scene of you heavily injuring third brother Lien with a single slash in the southern slaughter Mang Mountain. At that time, Ma Kuo helped you kill them. I ran fast and was lucky enough to escape with my life. But now, you're bringing Ma Kuo with you. You've got guts, haven't you?" Chu Xiu closed his eyes. He finally knew what the problem was, but it could only be a coincidence, a helpless coincidence. When Chu Xiu chose Ma Kuo to help him, one reason was that Ma Kuo was strong, bold, and careful. The second reason was that Ma Kuo almost never fought in the northern Death Mang Mountain. Although he did fight a few times in the southern Death Mang Mountain, he didn't leave any survivors. The only time someone knew about the relationship between Ma Kuo and Chu Xiu was when Ma Kuo met Chu Xiu for the first time. Chu Xiu hired Ma Kuo to help kill third brother Lien. There were many bandits under Lien Laosan's command, so Ma Kuo had only defeated them and killed some of them, but not all of them. Moreover, Chu Xiu really didn't consider this at the time, because even his third brother's subordinates were bandits. They didn't dare to enter Tongzhou Prefecture easily. He did not expect that there would be such a person among them. Not only did he return to the Tong State Prefecture, but he also joined the Shen family. He was chosen by Shen Rong, and in the end, Ma Kuo's identity was revealed. All of this could only be said to be a coincidence, and Chu Xiu was unlucky. Opening his eyes, Chu Xiu sat down again and said in a deep voice, "So Butler Shen wants me to keep my mouth shut?" Seeing that Chu Xiu had calmed down so quickly, Shen Rong was slightly stunned. Just now, he refused to admit it, but now that there was concrete evidence, he put on such a matter-of-fact look. Just this mentality alone could make him a character. Of course, Shen Rong did not think much about it. His mind was full of the Li family's property. Hearing this, he could not help but nod and say, "That's right. Chu Xiu, I advise you to be tactful and obediently hand over the Li family's property. Otherwise, if this matter is spread out, your fate will be even more miserable than your fourth brother, Chu Shang, who has been crippled by you." Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Butler Shin, you are making things too difficult for me. I have already handed over 2/3 of the Li family's property to my family. Even I only have 1/3 of the Li family's property. Where can I get 2/3 for you?" Shen Rong waved his hand indifferently and sneered, "I don't care about this kind of thing. Anyway, I only look at the result, not the process. I will give you 10 days. After 10 days, if I don't see anything, you should know the result. At that time, I am afraid that Chu Zongguang will put righteousness before family." Chu Xiu said with an expressionless face, "Is this matter really not negotiable?" Shen Rong stood up and pointed at Chu Xiu's shoulder. He proudly said, "Others can be discussed, but only you, Chu Xiu, do not have the qualifications to discuss. You only need to remember one thing. Your weakness has now fallen into my hands." A soft sound was heard. Shen Rong's smile froze on his face. His face was full of disbelief as he looked at the dagger that Chu Xiu had unknowingly stabbed into his chest. With a hoarse voice, he said intermittently, "I am the Shen family's chief butler. You dare to kill me?" Chu Xiu did not answer his words. He just covered Butler Shen's mouth and twisted the dagger in his hand. After Butler Shen was stabbed to death, he pushed him to the ground and looked at Wang Er. At this time, Wang Er was already scared silly. When he saw Chu Xiu's gaze, he wanted to shout, but Chu Xiu directly threw the dagger and nailed him to the ground. Looking at the two corpses on the ground, Chu Xiu could not help but frown. The reason he killed Steward Shin just now was not because of Steward Shin's mockery. He was not so low that he would lose his mind after being mocked by others. What truly aroused Chu Xiu's killing intent was precisely what Steward Shen said at the end. His weakness had already fallen into Steward Shen's hands. This time, Butler Shen opened his mouth and asked Chu Xiu for 2/3 of the Li family's property. Chu Xiu could take out 1/3, and if he calculated again, it was also possible to get another 1/3. But the problem was that human greed was infinite. Since Butler Shen had already grasped Chu Xiu's weakness, and if Chu Xiu gave in the first time, there would be a second and third time. The weakness had already fallen into the hands of the other party. Of course, the other party could do whatever they wanted. And this kind of thing was absolutely intolerable to Chu Xiu, so this Shenrong must die. At this time, Gao Bei heard the movement outside and quickly pushed the door in. But when he saw the corpses on the ground, his expression suddenly changed. He was about to exclaim, but he immediately covered his mouth and closed the door. He whispered to Chu Xiu in horror, "Young master, why did you kill the Shen family's people?" Gao Bei really could not understand. Everything was still fine before. How could Chu Xiu actually kill the Shen family's people in such a short time? Chu Xiu was not the kind of person who was irrational. The Li family was weaker than the Chu family. As long as the family was settled, Chu Xiu could do whatever he wanted. But now this was the Shen family's people, and it was the Shen family's housekeeper, Shenrong. This time they were in big trouble. Chu Xiu pulled out the dagger from the corpses, shook off the blood on the dagger and said faintly, "They were courting death. They used Ma Kuo's matter to threaten me. If I don't kill them, I will be the unlucky one." Gao Bei said with a sad face, "Young master, I was worried that your cooperation with those bandits was not reliable. Now it has been discovered. What should we do now? You killed the Shen family's housekeeper. It will not be easy to get away with it." The Shen family was not like the Li family. Of course, he knew that it would not be easy to get away with it. But when he killed the Shen family's housekeeper, Chu Xiu had already thought of an excuse. He took out the evidence written by Li Cheng to Shenrong from Shenrong's corpse. It was written with Shenrong's conditions and Li Cheng's promise. "Someone has sent an excuse to me. It is actually easy to get away with it." Chu Xiu looked at the corpses and said, "Clean up the corpses and follow me back to the Chu family." Gao Bei looked at the two corpses on the ground and was speechless. The young master's ability to handle matters was strong, but his ability to cause trouble was even stronger. When Chu Xiu returned to the Chu family, he immediately looked for housekeeper Chen and asked him to invite Chu Zongguang out. He also called all the elders and stewards of the Chu family. Although housekeeper Chen was puzzled about what Chu Xiu wanted, he did not ask much. After all, Chu Xiu's status in the Chu family was not the same as it was in the past. When Chu Zongguang arrived at the meeting hall, the others had also arrived. But Chu Zongguang's face had a trace of impatience. He hated people who came to disturb him the most. But recently, Chu Xiu was the one who disturbed him the most. "What's the matter? Didn't I warn you last time? Don't go looking for trouble." Chu Xiu lowered his head and said, "I killed the Shen family's housekeeper, Shenrong." "What?" As soon as the statement came out, Chu Zongguang directly crushed the teacup in his hand that was about to be brought to his mouth. The other elders also had a look of horror. Chu Zongguang pointed at Chu Xiu. His hand was trembling with anger as he shouted, "Chu Xiu, what do you want? You dare to kill anyone? Is it because you have the strength to even dare to kill the Azure Water Sword sect master?" Chu Xiu took out the evidence that Li Cheng wrote for Shenrong and said, "Lord Father, please take a look at this. It is not that I want to kill Shenrong, but Shenrong's actions were too excessive. The Li clan wanted to kill me, and Shenrong was an accomplice. Afterwards, he even wanted to ask for 2/3 of the Li clan's assets from my Chu clan. Simply overbearing and outrageous. This child was angry and gave Shenrong a saber strike. Who would have thought that his strength was so weak that he couldn't even block and was killed by me?" When the other elders saw the contents of the paper, they all frowned. To be honest, this Shenrong's actions were indeed a bit excessive. He used their Chu clan as a bargaining chip. After the Li clan was defeated, he still came to extort them. He simply didn't put the Chu clan in his eyes. If it was them, even if they were humiliated by Shenrong, they wouldn't dare to kill him. Although Shenrong was only the housekeeper of the Shen clan, his position in the Shen clan was definitely the #1 person under the patriarch. Shen Bai, who entered the Azure Water Sword sect, and the current patriarch, Shen Mo, were brought up by him. Even when Shen Mo was young, he had to call him Uncle Rong. Later on, when Shen Mo took over the position of patriarch, he beheaded several elders and killed the collateral descendants of the Shen clan. The status of those Shen clansmen couldn't be compared to Shenrong, who was just a housekeeper. Chapter 40. Chu Zongguang's anger didn't subside just because of what Chu Xiu took out. He stared at Chu Xiu and roared, "You killed him out of anger. Do you know Shenrong's status in the Shen clan? Now that he is dead, how will the Shen clan deal with our Chu clan? Unfilial son. By doing this, you are putting our Chu clan in an unjust position." Chu Xiu secretly frowned. This cheap father of his was a little too arrogant. Even if the Shen clan was strong, there was no need for him to be this afraid, right? Fortunately, Chu Xiu had already thought of a way to resolve this matter. Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "Don't panic, Lord Father. Although he's dead, it's not like our Chu clan doesn't have any other plans. The Shen clan's foundation is stronger than our Chu clan, but not to the extent of crushing us. The real reason why the Shen clan dominates the Tong province is because of Shen Bai, who has already joined the Azure Water Sword sect. The Azure Water Sword sect may be famous, but our Chu clan might be able to find a backer." Chu Zongguang glared at Chu Xiu. The Azure Water Sword sect is the #1 sect in Wei Prefecture, one of the 7 sects and 8 schools. Where can our Chu clan find a backer? Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. So what if it is 7 sects and 8 schools? It is not the northern and southern Buddhist sects, and even if it is not strong enough to dominate the entire pugilistic world. Our Chu clan cannot find a backer from the pugilistic world, but we can find a backer from the imperial court. Although Wei County was known as the land of the Northern Yan Kingdom, the truth was that it did not listen to the imperial court of the Northern Yan Kingdom. If our Chu clan were to side with the Northern Yan imperial court, even though our Chu clan's strength is nothing to the Northern Yan imperial court, but at least we would be considered as a martial arts force that voluntarily submitted to the Northern Yan. We can set an example, and I believe the Northern Yan imperial court will not mistreat us. With the support of the Northern Yan imperial court, the Azure Water Sword sect wouldn't dare to touch us. The elders of the Chu clan glanced at each other. Although Chu Xiu's plan sounded a little exaggerated, it did make sense if they thought about it carefully. The imperial court of the Northern Yan Kingdom had wanted Wei County for a long time. However, the martial arts world in Wei County was very tough, and the imperial court of the Northern Yan Kingdom did not want to fall out with the martial arts world in Wei County. Hence, they did not use tough methods. However, the Chu clan was from Eastern Qi, and they didn't have much of a sense of belonging to Wei Prefecture. If they could really get close to the Northern Yan imperial court through this matter, it would definitely be a good thing for the Chu clan. Chu Xiu was silent on the side. The idea he gave to the Chu family couldn't be considered a bad one, but it could only be said to be half good and half bad. Siding with the Northern Yan imperial court, there was a high possibility that as the first faction to side with the Northern Yan Empire, the Chu clan would receive preferential treatment. But there was also the possibility that the Chu clan would anger the entire Wei County martial arts world and be targeted. It was even possible that they would be torn apart by the Wei County martial arts world. Of course, this was a matter for the future. By that time, it was uncertain whether Chu Xiu would still be in the Chu clan. Whether the Chu clan would be targeted by the Wei County martial arts world, what did it have to do with him? Chu Zongguang's face revealed a gloomy expression. He didn't see the flaws in Chu Xiu's plan, he just didn't want to cause trouble. After a long while, Chu Zongguang coldly snorted and said, "Chu Xiu, I already said last time that if you cause trouble again, I'll take away all your business and have you reflect on yourself in the ancestral hall." In the end, you turned a deaf ear to my words. This time, you have caused such a huge mess, how you are going to be dealt with depends on the Shen clan. Now, go to the ancestral hall and reflect on yourself. If my Chu clan is targeted by the Shen clan because of you, I will not forgive you." As soon as he heard this, there was a trace of coldness in Chu Xiu's eyes. Chu Zongguang's performance was somewhat beyond his expectation. He didn't expect that Chu Zongguang would be so cowardly. According to the excuse that Chu Xiu used, it was the Shen clan who first blackmailed the Chu clan, so he killed them out of anger. At most, he was a little impulsive, and he had already said the countermeasures in public, but Chu Zongguang was still afraid of conflict with the Shen clan, so he wanted to punish him. "Someone, take Chu Xiu to the ancestral hall and send someone to guard him. Reflect on yourself." Chu Zongguang waved his hand, and 2 servants came over in embarrassment. They looked at Chu Xiu, hoping that Chu Xiu could cooperate. After all, they were just servants, and they didn't dare to use violence against Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu didn't lose his temper on the spot, but obediently left with the 2 servants. To be honest, he had miscalculated this time. Chu Xiu had always been very calm, even when he wanted to kill Shenrong. He had thought of a proper excuse and a way to break out of the situation. However, the only thing that he miscalculated was Chu Zongguang. He really couldn't figure out what his cheap father was thinking. As the head of the clan, he was actually so timid. Only God knew how the Chu clan had gained a foothold in the Tongzhou prefecture. After Chu Xiu was suppressed, the eldest brother Chu Kai, who had been silent in the hall, showed a look of ecstasy, but also a little disbelief. All along, none of his 3 younger brothers had been honest, especially recently. Even if Chu Kai was arrogant, he could feel that his position as the successor of the Chu clan was unstable. As a result, in just a few months, the 4th Prince Chu Shang was crippled, and then Chu Xing committed a big mistake and was put in confinement. And Chu Xiu, who was the biggest threat to him, was now seeking his own death. He actually killed Shenrong, the chief housekeeper of the Shen clan, was deprived of all his power, and was locked in the ancestral hall to reflect on himself. Didn't this mean that the position of the successor was not robbed by him? When he thought of this, Chu Kai felt a little proud. His 3 idiot younger brothers had schemed and schemed, but in the end, they had schemed against him. In the end, the position of the successor of the Chu clan was still his. Chu Zongguang looked gloomy and waved his hand, letting the crowd disperse. He said to housekeeper Chen, "You go to the Shen clan, humble yourself, and ask them how we can get rid of this matter. My Chu clan absolutely has no intention to have a conflict with the Shen clan." Housekeeper Chen wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't say anything and could only sigh and leave. In the Shen clan, because Shenrong came to see Chu Xiu, he only brought his trusted aide, Wang Er, so no one else knew that Shenrong had died. It wasn't until housekeeper Chen came to the Shen clan that everyone in the Shen clan knew that Shenrong had died. This immediately caused an uproar in the Shen clan, and someone immediately informed Shen Mo, who was in seclusion. Shen Mo wasn't old, only in his early 30s. He had a handsome appearance and didn't look like the head of a clan, but more like a distinguished and elegant young master. Similar to the Li clan, the Shen clan was also because of the accidental death of the old patriarch, and Shen Mo hurriedly took over the position of the patriarch. But at that time, because Shen Mo didn't have any prestige, he was almost made a figurehead by the Shen clan's elders. As a result, Shen Mo killed several Shen clan's elders in a fit of rage and declared that as long as his elder brother from the Azure Water Sword sect was around, the Shen clan wouldn't collapse. As for the rest, it was the same no matter who was missing. After the storm, Shen Mo used the heads of several elders to establish the position of the Shen clan's patriarch. It also let everyone in the Tong province know that although this new Shen clan's patriarch was young, his ruthlessness and decisiveness far surpassed his father. Right now, Shen Mo was in seclusion. Ever since he took control of the Shen clan, Shen Mo didn't really care about the Shen clan. A few years ago, he once followed his elder brother, Shen Bai, to the Azure Water Sword sect. That experience refreshed Shen Mo's worldview and let him know what a true martial arts sect was. In the eyes of the Azure Water Sword sect, the Shen clan's assets weren't even worth mentioning. Since then, Shen Mo began to cultivate in seclusion in order to join the Azure Water Sword sect. It was a pity that even though he and Shen Bai were blood brothers, their innate talents were too inferior. Shen Bai's innate talent and perception were top-notch, while he, Shen Mo, could only be considered above average. This kind of innate talent was enough to join the Azure Water Sword sect. Especially since Shen Bai was the Azure Water Sword sect master's last disciple, it wouldn't be a problem to accept him into the Azure Water Sword sect. But the problem was that with his strength and innate talent, after joining the Azure Water Sword sect, he could only be an outer sect disciple. His elder brother was the sect master's direct disciple, while his younger brother was just an ordinary outer sect disciple. This was a face that Shen Mo couldn't afford to lose. Therefore, he was now using all his time to cultivate in order to join the Azure Water Sword sect in the future and become an inner sect disciple. After being woken up from his seclusion, Shen Mo's expression was somewhat unkind. But after the servant informed Shen Mo of Shen Rong's death, his expression immediately turned gloomy. To be honest, Shen Rong wasn't that important in Shen Mo's heart. Even though he called Shen Rong as Uncle Rong when he was young, but he even dared to kill his own blood-related uncles, the Shen clan's elders and other uncles. What was a servant worth? The reason why he gave Shen Rong such a high status was because he didn't trust the Shen clan's direct descendants and collateral relatives. Even though Shen Rong's ability and strength were average, and he was also very greedy, but at least he was loyal enough and knew who gave him his authority. In other words, he, Shen Rong, was just a dog of Shen Mo, not a dog of the Shen clan, but a dog that belonged to him, Shen Mo. But when beating a dog, one must look at the owner, not to mention that someone actually dared to kill his dog. Chapter 41. The dog that he raised was killed. This made Shen Mo very angry, but he felt that it was troublesome. The Shen family dominated the Tongzhou prefecture, so there was not much to do. With Shen Rong's ability, she could take care of everything. Shen Rong was loyal enough, and he could use her easily. But now she was killed. Where could he find another person like her? At this time, the servant said cautiously, "Master, the Chu family is waiting outside. They said that this matter was just an accident. They have absolutely no intention to have a conflict with our Shen family. As long as the Shen family is willing to let this matter go, everything can be discussed." Shen Mo raised his eyebrows. Everything can be discussed? This Chu clan is quite tactful. Call the Chu clan's people over. In the living room, housekeeper Chen humbly bowed to Shen Mo and said, "Master Shen, my Chu family, okay, I know what you want to say. No need to talk nonsense." Housekeeper Chen was interrupted by Shen Mo before he finished speaking. Shen Mo waved his hand and said, "Your Chu family's second son killed my Shen family's housekeeper. This matter is not so easy to settle. But considering your Chu family's sincerity this time, I will be lenient this time and not pursue the matter further." Housekeeper Chen heaved a sigh of relief and heard Shen Mo say lightly, "I also can't bear to see your master send off his son. As for that Chu Xiu, just abolish his martial arts and teach him a lesson." After housekeeper Chen heard this, he was shocked. Abolishing his martial arts was no different from killing Chu Xiu. Just as he wanted to say something, he saw Shen Mo's face turn gloomy. "Don't refuse. Your Chu family has no right to refuse now. I am already magnanimous enough. After a few days, it will be the Qingming festival. My eldest brother is preparing to return to the Shen family to pay his respects to his father. At that time, if this matter reaches his ears, he will not be as easy to talk to as me. Take these words back to Chu Zongguang. The choice is in his hands. Whether he wants his son or the Chu family, let him choose." As his voice fell, Shen Mo turned around and left, leaving a helpless housekeeper Chen. The backer behind the Shen clan was too great, so great that as long as that backer was brought out, it could completely crush their Chu clan. When housekeeper Chen told Chu Zongguang about the Shen family's intention, Chu Zongguang's face revealed a trace of anger. Obviously, he was also dissatisfied with the Shen family's overbearing attitude. Housekeeper Chen whispered, "Master, why don't I do as second young master suggested and seek refuge with the Northern Yen? Even if the Kanglin is the Kanglin sect, how can they be stronger than the Northern Yen sect?" Chu shook his head and said, "Absolutely not. Old Chen, you know what I'm doing. I'm at a critical moment in my research. How would I have the time to deal with these things? Chu Zongguang's face revealed a cold expression as he said, Housekeeper Chen, go tell Shinimo that I agree to his conditions. Invite him to the Chu clan for a drink tonight. I'll cripple Chu Xiu in front of everyone and give him an explanation. Housekeeper Chen hesitated, but second young master's talent is not bad. In the future, Chu Zongguang waved his hand and said, the future is the future. Let that unfilial son bear the consequences of his own actions. I will remember this matter with the Shun family. In the future, when I have successfully researched that thing and my strength has greatly increased, I will personally find the Shun family to settle this account. Also, I, Chu Zongguang, have more than one son. Chu Xiu, that unfilial son, is too radical and not suitable to manage the family. This time, I will cripple his martial arts and spare his life. Let him be a rich young master. Don't think too much about useless things. Housekeeper Chen shook his head. Since Chu Zongguang had already done so, he could only do as he was told. At this time, the Chu clan had also begun to prepare a banquet to welcome Shinimo. Chu Zongguang's decision was not hidden from others. When Gao Bei heard the news from others, he immediately jumped in fright. He hastily took a pile of food and pretended to deliver it to Chu Xiu as he entered the ancestral hall. The person guarding the ancestral hall was a blood condensation expert of the Chu clan. There were also several servants of the Chu clan. They didn't stop Gao Bei from going to see Chu Xiu. In truth, they also didn't approve of Chu Zongguang's method. After killing a Shun family housekeeper, he wanted to cripple his own son's martial arts to atone for his crime. This was a bit too cowardly. Within the ancestral hall, Chu Xiu's expression was calm. Seeing Gao Bei walk in, Chu Xiu frowned and said, Has there been a change in the situation outside? Gao Bei put down the box of food and whispered to Chu Xiu, Young master, it's not good. The Shun family's head, Shinimo, actually wants you to cripple your own martial arts to atone for his crime. In the end, the master agreed. Shinimo will come tonight. The master is prepared to cripple your martial arts in front of everyone to give Shinimo an explanation. Chu Xiu's face immediately revealed a trace of coldness. This father of his was really able to bear to do this. For a martial artist, crippling someone's martial arts was simply worse than death. It was no different from killing them. What really made Chu Xiu unable to believe was that Chu Zongguang had actually agreed to such an outrageous condition. Was it because the Shun family was too strong, or was Chu Zongguang too cowardly? Young master, what should we do now? Should I go inform Ma Kuo and ask him to come help? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, It's useless. Ma Kuo hasn't reached the blood condensation realm yet. He can't even break into the Chu clan, so I can't go out either. Chu Xiu could definitely kill the blood condensation expert guarding the ancestral hall. But the problem was that he didn't have the goose feather saber with him. He only had a short saber. If he wanted to kill the opponent, it would definitely take some time, and that time would be enough for Chu Zongguang to arrive. Although the difference between the blood condensation realm and the Xiantian realm was only one realm, it was still a small bottleneck. As long as it was a bottleneck, after crossing it, it would usher in a sharp increase in strength. With Chu Xiu's current strength, he had no confidence that he could defeat Chu Zongguang. Moreover, time was a little tight. It was already noon, and Shinimo would come in the evening. If he had a few more days, Chu Xiu could have asked Ma Kuo to go to Shangmeng Mountain to find Han Bao and ask him to save him. Unfortunately, it was too late now. Chu Xiu thought for a moment, and his eyes couldn't help but reveal a frightening cold light. There was a pen and paper in the ancestral hall, which was used to record the date of worship and other things. Chu Xiu wrote something on the paper, folded it, and handed it to Gao Bei. He said in a deep voice, Give this paper to Ma Kuo. Ask him to take it to the three strange people. After they get the things, ask Ma Kuo to leave immediately and return to Shangmeng Mountain. You as well. After you give the paper to Ma Kuo, immediately leave with the caravan and go to Qingyuan town. Remember, after you leave, don't ever come back. Gao Bei's eyes revealed a touch of shock. What was Chu Xiu planning to do after sending him and Ma Kuo away? Although he didn't know the details, Gao Bei could already vaguely guess the result. He was just about to say something, but Chu Xiu directly shouted in a low voice, "Time is running out, and there's no time for nonsense. Just do as I say." Gao Bei gritted his teeth, put the paper close to his body, and left the ancestral hall. Chu Xiu, however, opened the food box expressionlessly. Inside was his favorite yellow wine, a golden pheasant, and some side dishes. With a calm expression, he poured a glass of wine and tore off a chicken leg. However, at this moment, there was a faint trace of killing intent in Chu Xiu's eyes. He could no longer sit on the position of the Chu family's successor. Plans could not keep up with changes. Chu Xiu did not want things to come to this point, but he did not want to be crippled of his martial arts. Therefore, the others could only die. At night, the Chu family's mansion was brightly lit. Shen Nemo also arrived as promised. He was very satisfied with the Chu family's tactfulness. Shen Nemo only brought a few trusted subordinates to the Chu family, but Chu Zongguang directly brought Chu Kai, Chu Sheng, who had just been released, and some elders of the Chu family to personally welcome him. Patriarch Shen's visit this time really brings light to our humble Chu family. The banquet has been prepared, please come in. Chu Zongguang's face showed a trace of a hypocritical smile. Although he also secretly hated Shen Mo's domineering attitude, people under the eaves still had to bow their heads. Since he was not going to make an enemy of the Shen family, he had to show enough face. Shen Nemo casually cupped his hands and said, "Patriarch Chu is too polite." Once everyone was seated in the living room, Chu Zongguang raised his wine cup to Shen Nemo and said, "Patriarch Shen, my unfilial son killing Shen Rong was really a misunderstanding. That unfilial son has always been restless, and in this period of time, who knows how much trouble he has caused. Today, I will cripple him in front of Patriarch Shen as an apology." Shen Mo nodded and said, "In a martial arts family like mine, the most important thing for disciples is to follow the rules. Without rules, nothing can be accomplished. Chu Xiu really should be taught a lesson." Chu Zongguang waved his hand and said in a deep voice, "Go and bring Chu Xiu over." After a moment, the blood condensation cultivator of the Chu family brought Chu Xiu over. This was Shen Mo's first time seeing Chu Xiu, but this first meeting made him feel a bit strange. At this time, Chu Xiu should already know his situation. He had been stripped of all his authority and his martial arts had been crippled. But why didn't he have the slightest panic on his face? Instead, he was extremely calm. Chu Zongguang coldly snorted and was just about to say something when he heard a loud sound. The Chu family's main gate was directly blown open and miserable screams rang out from the front courtyard. Chapter 42. The sudden incident in the Chu clan left everyone stunned, including Shen Mo. With the Chu clan's status in the Tongzhou prefecture, who would dare to attack the Chu clan so openly? Only the Shen clan could do so. But now that he was in the Chu clan, who could it be? At this time, Chu Zongguang could not be bothered to punish Chu Xiu. He hurriedly led his men to the front courtyard. But as soon as they arrived, a pungent smell of blood assaulted their nostrils. Some of the Chu clan's women even screamed on the spot. The entire Chu clan's front courtyard was like a slaughterhouse. Dozens of the Chu clan's servants and stewards' corpses lay on the ground. Some of them did not even have complete corpses. In the middle of the corpses, there were 3 warriors with powerful auras. They were the 3 strange experts that Chu Xiu had met in the inn back then. Among the 3, the one with the whip mark on his face held a ferocious-looking ghost head blade, while the other 2 held long spears. The moment he saw the 3, Chu Zongguang's expression suddenly changed, as if he had seen a ghost. The man with the whip mark on his face looked at Chu Zongguang and laughed sinisterly. "Zhang Zonghai. No, I should call you Chu Zongguang. You treacherous, shameless, and despicable person. You didn't expect this, did you? We are still alive and we even found this place. For the past 20 years, we have searched all of Eastern Qi, but we could not find any trace of you. So when you joined the Dragon Rider Imperial Army, you used a fake name. Dragon Rider Imperial Army." When these 4 words came out, everyone's expression changed. Shen Emo looked at Chu Zongguang in shock. You are actually from the Dragon Rider Imperial Army. Chu Xiu's eyes were also filled with surprise. Clearly, he did not expect Chu Zongguang to have such a background. The so-called Dragon Rider Imperial Army was an army under the Eastern Qi military, but it was the elite of the elite. Even the weakest among them had to have the strength of the Xiantian realm. Although the Imperial Dragon Riders belonged to the military in name, in reality, only the Eastern Qi royal family could command it. It was an elite force that took orders from the royal family. As an elite of the Eastern Qi royal family, the Dragon Riders' Forbidden Army was not something a small family head in Tongzhou Prefecture could compare to. Yet, more than 20 years ago, Chu Zongguang had left the Dragon Riders' Forbidden Army and moved his entire family to Tongzhou Prefecture to be a local tyrant. What had happened in the process was very thought-provoking. The man with the whip mark looked at the expressions of the others and revealed a trace of hatred as he said, "It seems like you don't know anything about Chu Zongguang. Then I'll tell you today, what kind of person was the Chu clan's patriarch in the past. My Dragon Rider Imperial Army is made up of 5 people. 20 years ago, when Chu Zongguang joined the Dragon Rider Imperial Army, he was assigned to this group. At that time, we received orders to cooperate with the experts of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army to secretly infiltrate the Miao territory of Western Chu and seize a treasure for the second prince. After those experts seized the treasure, they were responsible for delaying them while the dozen of us were responsible for taking the real or fake treasure and escaping, scattering the target. It just so happened that our group obtained the real treasure. Just as we were desperately resisting the pursuers, that despicable and shameless Chu Zongguang actually took the treasure and escaped. The warrior with the whip mark on his face had a ferocious look on his face. He pointed at the whip mark on his face and said hatefully, "At that time, Big Brother led us to escape from the pursuers with great difficulty. But because we lost our treasures, we were almost killed by the second prince. The whip mark on my face was because of the second prince's anger. Big Brother was a squad leader, but he suffered a full 100 strikes of the Green Dragon Whip and was beaten to death. Although the 3 of us were lucky enough to escape with our lives, we were also whipped several dozen times. We were seriously injured and our foundations were damaged. We can only stay at the Qi-controlling internal aura realm for the rest of our lives." In the back, Chu Xiu let out a long sigh of relief. He finally understood why Chu Zongguang was acting strangely, and he also understood why the Chu family had changed in the original plot. Chu Zongguang was not weak. As a member of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army, he was definitely stronger than other martial artists of the same level. This was also the reason why Chu Zongguang was able to easily establish himself in the Tong state capital. However, in these past 20 years, Chu Zongguang had been studying the treasure he had stolen, neglecting his cultivation and even neglecting the management of the family. He had neglected everything. No wonder Chu Zongguang didn't care about anything and closed himself up all day, wholeheartedly seeking stability. For Chu Zongguang, nothing was more important than studying the treasure. The martial artist with the whip mark on his face looked at Chu Zongguang and said coldly, "When you joined the Dragon Rider Imperial Army, you were the weakest, and Big Brother took care of you the most. In the end, because of you, Big Brother died. After so many years, do you have a clear conscience?" Chu Zongguang let out a long breath and said, "Every man for himself, heaven and earth destroy. Back then, that treasure was in my hands. It was a treasure that could allow people to reach the heavens in one step. If it were you, wouldn't you be tempted?" The martial artist with the whip mark on his face sneered and said, "Good man for himself, heaven and earth destroy. Back then, you betrayed us, but do you know that we were able to find you smoothly this time because someone sent us a message? Only then did we know that you were using a fake name." "Who?" Chu Zongguang's expression suddenly changed. Chu Xiu walked out from the crowd and stood to the side, saying indifferently, "It was me." Chu Zongguang's expression suddenly became incomparably ugly. He pointed at Chu Xiu and shouted, "Evil creature! Do you know what you have done? Doing this will destroy the entire Chu family." Chu Xiu said in a cold voice, "Father, you forced me to do this. I killed a servant of the Qin family and you want to cripple my martial arts. Do you know what this means for a martial artist? A life worse than death. If I don't want to die, then the ones who will die can only be you. The martial artist with the whip mark on his face sneered and said, Chu Zongguang, you also have this day. Back then you betrayed us, and now you have been betrayed by your own son. This is retribution. Chu Zongguang's eyes revealed a touch of ruthlessness, and he said in a deep voice, You three, I was indeed in the wrong in that matter, but it's all in the past. I am willing to take out that treasure and we can share it. Can you let me go this time? The man with the whip mark on his face sneered and said, Let you go? I want to agree, but Big Brother in the underworld will not agree. With that said, the man opened a box behind him and took out a knife from it. The knife's edge was transparent, and the blade was crimson. It was like a transparent glass with a crimson spine. It was magnificent and incomparably resplendent. This knife is called the Red Sleeve Knife. It is a treasure that we three brothers have collected for the second prince all these years, in order to obtain the second prince's forgiveness. If we kill you now and take back the treasure, not only can we clear Big Brother's name, but we can also regain our footing in the Dragon Rider's imperial army. We will no longer be ridiculed by others. Shen Mo saw the killing intent in the eyes of the three people, and he quickly said, You three, I am not a member of the Chu family. If you want to kill me, then kill me. I will leave immediately. The martial artist with the whip mark on his face sneered and said, Not a member of the Chu family? Today, the Chu family held a banquet to invite you, right? Those who are jackals of the same tribe as Chu Zongguang are not good people. They must die all the same. Shen Mo groaned in his heart. These three people were clearly angry because they had avenged their hatred of more than 20 years ago. No matter who it was, they were going to kill them. Chu Xiu hurriedly said, Three heroes, you saw my relationship with Chu Zongguang just now. Although I am his son, Chu Zongguang wants to cripple my martial arts. I hate him to the bone as much as he does. Moreover, I understand the situation of the Chu family. In a moment, I will help you find all the treasures of the Chu family. I hope the three of you will spare my life. The other two looked at the martial artist with the whip mark on his face. The martial artist thought for a moment and said, Let this brat live for now. The fourth prince, you go and kill the rest of the Chu family. Chu Zongguang killed Big Brother and cheated us for more than 20 years. Today, I will bury the entire Chu family with him. As his voice fell, one of the martial artists directly rushed towards the Chu family with a spear. Whether it was the servants of the Chu family, the old, the weak, the women, or the children, they were all ruthlessly killed. After holding back for more than 20 years, now that they had their revenge, they didn't care whether they were killing innocent people or not. Chu Kai and the others forgot to resist. Previously, he had been gloating over the fact that Chu Xiu had been crippled. He had easily become the successor of the Chu family. But now, he wished that he had never been a member of the Chu family. Seeing his clansmen and children killed, Chu Zongguang's eyes flashed with determination. To be honest, he had dreamed of this scene countless times. He didn't care about betraying his brothers. With the treasure in his hands, he didn't even care about his own son, so why would he care about his brothers? What Chu Zongguang really feared was the second prince of Eastern Qi and the other dragon riders. Back then, he took the supreme treasure and fled back to the Chu clan in panic, directly bringing the Chu clan's people to Wei Prefecture. What he feared the most was that the Dragon Rider Imperial Army's people would catch up and capture him back to Qi, where he would be punished by the furious second prince. In the end, after so many years, nothing had happened. He thought that the matter had passed, but in the end he still couldn't avoid it. Since he couldn't avoid it, he could only fight. If the experts of the Dragon Rider's Imperial Army came to kill him, Chu Zongguang wouldn't even have the thought of resisting. He might even choose to commit suicide. Otherwise, if he was captured, he would be in a situation worse than death. But now, if there were only these three people, he still dared to fight. Chapter 43. The three dragon riders clashed with Chu Zongguang and the others. Chu Xiu stood far away, watching with cold eyes. Chu Xiu had never considered the Chu clan as his own, so even if the Chu clan was exterminated, he wouldn't feel any heartache. Therefore, he was still in the mood to observe the details of a fight between martial artists above the Xiantian realm, accumulating some martial arts experience for himself. Among the 3 dragon riders, one of them went to kill the old, weak, sick, and servants of the Chu clan. It was a completely one-sided massacre, nothing worth watching. What was truly worth watching was the fight between the other 2 and Chu Zongguang and Shinemo. The 2 dragon riders were at the inner aura realm of the 5th layer of the Imperial Qi realm, but looking at the strength of their attacks, in addition to what they had said before, Chu Xiu guessed that they had reached the inner aura realm more than 20 years ago. It was only because they were severely injured from the punishment that their foundations were injured, so they hadn't made any progress in the past 20 years, and their strength had even declined a bit. But even if their strength had declined, they were still at the inner aura realm, stronger than Chu Zongguang and Shinemo. The martial artist with the whip mark on his face wielded a red sleeve blade. In fact, his martial arts were wide and broad, and the red sleeve blade itself was a thin blade, not suitable for his martial arts. But the red sleeve blade was extremely sharp, and in just a few moves, it cut Chu Zongguang's long sword in half. Chu Zongguang's eyes revealed a hint of ruthlessness. Over the years, he had dreamed of the dragon riders coming to capture him countless times, so he had prepared a few trump cards over the years. The moment his sword was cut in half, Chu Zongguang immediately took out a blood-red pill and threw it into his mouth. Suddenly, he spat out a mouthful of blood, causing the cultivator with the whip scar on his face to be caught off guard. His eyes were stained with a bloody mist. But this bit of blood mist made him let out a mournful howl, and blood flowed from his eyes. It's the 5 poison sex blood transformation pill. The martial artist with the whip mark on his face covered his eyes and retreated, his face full of panic. The 5 poison cult cultivated poison arts, and the blood transformation divine pill was a secret pill of the 5 poison cult. To the people of the 5 poison cult, it was a great supplement, but to other martial artists, it was a deadly poison. Chu Zongguang immediately threw another dark green pill into his mouth. This was the antidote to the blood transformation dan. This kind of method hurt others and hurt oneself. Even if there was an antidote, Chu Zongguang's body was still poisoned and his foundation was injured. Taking advantage of this person's blinded eyes, Chu Zongguang continued to attack. What he used was not the martial skills of the Chu family, but the battle formation technique he had learned from the Dragon Rider Imperial Army. His attacks were incomparably vicious. Taking advantage of the enemy's blinded eyes and the poison attacking his heart, Chu Zongguang was able to shatter the martial artist's heart meridians in just a few moves, killing him on the spot. Second brother. The warrior who was sent to kill the Chu clan members had just returned when he saw this scene. His eyes immediately turned red. He had never thought that his second brother, who had always been cautious, would actually fail miserably at Chu Zongguang's hands. After searching for more than 20 years, he had finally found his enemy. He never thought that just as he was about to take his revenge, he would accidentally die here. Chu Xiu coldly watched all of this, feeling a bit of understanding in his heart. In a battle between martial artists, unless one had overwhelming strength, there were all sorts of methods that could be used. There were simply too many unexpected situations, and if one wasn't careful, they could be killed by someone weaker than them. For example, when Chu Xiu first fought with Li Zhong had used the subduing tiger staff to the point of perfection, completely suppressing Chu Xiu. But because of external factors, Li Zhong had become impatient and died at the hands of Chu Xiu. Now, the warrior with the whip scar on his face was the same. The weapon in his hand was powerful, and his cultivation level was also a level higher than Chu Zongguang. But because of the excitement of getting his revenge, his vigilance was lowered, which was why Chu Zongguang's sneak attack was successful, and he was killed instead. Another martial artist charged towards him with a spear in his hand. This time, Chu Zongguang could only barely resist. He did not have a second blood transformation divine pill. Moreover, this method would not work a second time. Chu Zongguang shouted at Shinemo, who was still struggling, "Patriarch Shin, if you have a trump card, Hurry up and use it. If you don't take it out now, it will be too late. Shen Mo's identity as the patriarch of the Shen clan wasn't worth mentioning, but his other identity was the younger brother of Azure Water Sword Sect's Falling Rain Sword, Shen Bai. With this identity, how could Shen Mo have a life-saving trump card that Shen Bai gave him? Shen Mo's expression was uncertain. He felt that he was the most unlucky one in today's matter. Chu Zongguang was the one who committed the sin, but in the end, he was implicated. Who did he offend? But in fact, if Shen Mo thought deeper, this time, if it wasn't for Shen Rong threatening Chu Xiu wouldn't have killed him. And if Shen Mo's attitude wasn't so arrogant and overbearing, forcing Chu Zongguang to cripple Chu Xiu wouldn't have taken the risk to attract these 3 Dragon Rider Imperial Army members. This was the cycle of karma. Shen Mo was courting death this time. But now that things had come to this, Shen Mo felt that he couldn't hold on any longer, and he finally began to panic. At this moment, Shen Mo suddenly thought of something, and his eyes revealed a smear of surprise. When the Dragon Rider Imperial Army member forced him into a corner, Shen Mo immediately took out a short sword from his bosom. With a thrust of the sword, Shen Mo's complexion instantly turned pale. The short sword unceasingly extracted qi from within his body, transforming it into a sharp sword light that was several feet long. The speed was incomparably fast, and it actually cut the long spear in the hands of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army member in front of him into 2. Dipper qi. How is this possible? The Dragon Rider Imperial Army member that was fighting with Chu Zongguang immediately turned pale with fright. Only martial artists that had reached the physical invulnerability realm could transform qi into Dipper qi. This was common knowledge. But now, a Xiantian martial artist was actually able to slash out a sword light with Dipper qi, and with such formidable might. This was simply impossible. Xiantian martial artists obviously couldn't use Dipper qi, and the reason why Shen Mo was able to do this was because of the short sword in his hand. This short sword was the sword of a senior elder of the Azure Water Sword sect when he was young. Although he didn't use it anymore, it was still nurtured by that elder to have an extremely strong sword intent. For a regular martial artist, as long as they had enough strength to activate it, the sword intent within the short sword would guide the strength and transform it into a sword light. However, this short sword was after all an ordinary 3rd advancement weapon, and its sturdiness was average. Although it contained sword intent, it couldn't withstand too much direct force. Just a single slash had already caused a crack to appear on the surface, and it was estimated that it wouldn't be able to be used more than a few times. Therefore, this item was actually a consumable item, and was given by Shen Bai to Shen Mo to protect himself. On the other side, Chu Zongguang took advantage of this opportunity to forcefully attack with all his might, and actually slightly reversed the situation. Shen Mo wielded his sword and followed Chu Zongguang to surround and kill the last Dragon Rider Imperial Army member, but he didn't activate the sword light. He had already expended enough qi, and if he used another move, his qi would probably be completely exhausted. However, if he didn't use his trump card, even if the 2 of them ganged up on one person, they still wouldn't be able to defeat the opponent. Instead, they were forced to retreat step by step by the Dragon Rider Imperial Army member. Looking at the corpses of his 2 comrades on the ground, the last Dragon Rider Imperial Army member revealed a look of grief and hatred. He originally thought that he would be able to get his revenge this time, but he didn't expect Chu Zongguang to be so cunning, and that Shen Mo actually had such a terrifying trump card. He didn't know if Shen Mo's short sword could still be used, but he didn't dare to continue gambling. As such, the Dragon Rider Imperial Army member gritted his teeth and retreated, preparing to leave. However, seeing that the Dragon Rider Imperial Army member wanted to leave, Chu Zongguang began to panic. The other party already knew his true identity. Once he returned to Eastern Qi and reported his identity to the Dragon Rider Imperial Army, what awaited Chu Zongguang would be endless pursuit. He definitely couldn't let the other party leave alive. Chu Zongguang directly pressed forward, pushing the Chu clan's vast sea heart technique to its limit. With a few steps, he arrived behind the Dragon Rider Imperial Army member, and his palm struck towards the middle of his back. The Dragon Rider Imperial Army member didn't even turn his head. The spear in his hand seemed to have grown eyes. The tip of the spear trembled, and like a blossoming lotus, it shot straight towards Chu Zongguang. He originally wanted to force Chu Zongguang to retreat, but who knew that Chu Zongguang wouldn't even try to dodge? Instead, he forcibly gripped the spear. The powerful force immediately caused Chu Zongguang to spit out a mouthful of blood, but he still didn't let go. This made the Dragon Rider Imperial Army member immediately realize that things weren't looking good. He wanted to abandon the spear and retreat, but it was already too late. "Do it!" Chu Zongguang shouted at Shen Emo. Shen Emo raised the short sword in his hand and poured the last bit of his true qi into it. The sword light suddenly scattered down, but its target wasn't only the Dragon Rider Imperial Army member, but also Chu Zongguang. The sword light pierced through the two of them. Chu Zongguang looked at the terrifying wound on his chest in disbelief. He continuously spat out blood and struggled to ask, "Why?" Shen Emo expressionlessly said, "That is a treasure that even the second prince of Eastern Qi wants. I also want it." Today, everyone had died here. Even if he stole something that originally belonged to the second prince of Eastern Qi, who would know? Perhaps if he obtained that item, he would no longer have to look up to his older brother, Shen Bai. Instead, Shen Bai would have to look up to him. Chapter 44. Misfortune may be a blessing in disguise. Right now, Shen Emo had this feeling. Previously, he was thinking about how unlucky he was to be implicated in this matter. He didn't expect Chu Zongguang to be able to kill a Dragon Rider Imperial Guard. This gave Shen Emo a new idea. No matter what it was, 20 years ago, when the second prince of Eastern Qi sent the Dragon Rider Imperial Guard to snatch it, Chu Zongguang became greedy and betrayed his brothers. He didn't even hesitate to leave his home with his family. This was enough to prove the value of that item. And now, that item belonged to him. But at this moment, a slight mechanical sound could be heard. Shen Emo subconsciously turned his head and saw Chu Xiu's Thousand Chance Sect hidden weapon, Thousand Leaf Plume. In an instant, countless leaves rained down. It was incomparably magnificent, bringing with it a resplendent killing intent. Shen Mo's eyes widened in shock. He didn't forget about Chu Xiu, but he didn't expect that in a fight of this level, a blood condensation realm martial artist like Chu Xiu would actually dare to make a move. And where did he get the hidden weapon in his hand? This was a hidden weapon that could threaten a Xiantian realm martial artist. Shen Emo hurriedly raised his sword to block. But at this moment, the short sword in his hand had become extremely fragile after activating the sword light twice. After blocking a dozen thousand leaf plume, it actually shattered. And at this moment, a silver blade had already appeared in front of his eyes. This blade was extremely fast. By the time Shen Emo reacted, he could already smell the scent of blood on the blade. With his weapon shattered by the thousand-leaf plume, Shen Emo couldn't block it. He subconsciously wanted to dodge, but to his horror, he discovered that his movements were a little too slow. Because after using 2 sword lights, his qi had already been completely exhausted. "You are courting death." There was no way to block, no way to dodge. At the moment of life and death, Shen Emo used his fingers as a sword, condensing all the qi and blood in his body into his index and middle fingers, causing these 2 fingers to carry a sliver of sharp sword qi as they pierced towards Chu Xiu's chest. Pulse-severing sword finger. This wasn't the Shen clan's martial arts, but the Azure Water Sword sect's martial arts. The Azure Water Sword sect was a sect that respected the sword, but it didn't mean that the Azure Water Sword sect didn't have any other martial arts. Shen Emo wasn't a disciple of the Azure Water Sword sect. Even if Shen Bai was the sect master's direct disciple, he didn't dare to impart the Azure Water Sword sect's esoteric sword arts to Shen Emo. Therefore, he only imparted the Pulse Break Sword Finger, which wasn't classified as esoteric, to Shen Emo to increase his strength. Although this meridian-severing finger sword did not contain much Shen qi, it was condensed with all the qi and blood of a Xiantian lord. If it hit, Shen Mo's two fingers would not be able to withstand such a powerful force and would directly explode. However, a bloody hole would also appear on Chu Xiu's chest. Shen Mo wanted to force Chu Xiu to retreat, but Chu Xiu's eyes were only calm and strong killing intent. As a blood condensation realm martial artist against a Xiantian, his first move was the Azure Dragon Sleeve. He only had this one chance. If he retreated, he would be defeated. Therefore, Chu Xiu's blade didn't deviate in the slightest, but his body suddenly tilted a little. Shen Mo's meridian severing fingersword finger landed on his shoulder blade, and with a loud explosion, blood splattered everywhere. The flesh and blood on Shen Mo's two fingers exploded, while Chu Xiu's shoulder blade shattered. A bone-deep hole was blasted open. The blade slashed across, and Shen Mo's eyes were filled with boundless blood. Some of it was Chu Xiu's, and some of it was his own. After a single slash, his head fell to the ground. Chu Xiu clutched his shoulder, looked at Shen Mo's headless corpse, and spoke indifferently, "That's right, everyone wants a treasure, and I too want it." The surroundings were silent, and the pungent smell of blood permeated the Chu clan. There wasn't a single living person in the entire Chu clan. Chu Xiu looked at his left shoulder. Although he had used his Jinqi to temporarily seal off his meridians, blood was still flowing out. His left arm was temporarily crippled. Chu Xiu didn't dare to tarry. 3 Imperial Dragon Riders had died here, and even Shen Mo had died here. Chu Xiu could no longer stay in the Tongzhou Prefecture, or rather, the entire Wei Prefecture. The 3 Imperial Dragon Riders each carried a box on their backs, and from the looks of it, it should be a treasure prepared for the second prince of Eastern Qi. Among them, the box of the warrior with the whip mark on his face contained the red sleeve blade. Chu Xiu didn't have time to take a closer look. He directly picked up the blade, carried the other 2 boxes on his back, and searched them one by one. However, the 3 Imperial Dragon Riders only had a few taels of silver and common medicine on them, and nothing else of value. Chu Xiu also found 3 badges that belonged to the Imperial Dragon Riders. After thinking for a moment, he also put them into his bosom. After doing all this, Chu Xiu didn't have time to tend to his injuries. He directly ran inside the Chu clan, to Chu Zongguang's courtyard, and began to frantically search for the treasure. For the sake of this item, the second prince of Eastern Qi had sent the experts of the Imperial Dragon Riders to steal it. Chu Zongguang was willing to betray his brother for it, and Shen Mo could have used his dagger as a trump card to escape. However, he became greedy and ultimately left his life in the Chu clan. Just like what Chu Xiu had said, everyone wanted the treasure. Just now, he had ambushed Shen Mo and even risked his life. Wasn't it all for the treasure? However, after searching through Chu Zongguang's courtyard, whether it was his residence or Chu Zongguang's place of seclusion, there were no traces of the treasure. There were only a few large banknotes, about 500,000 taels of silver, and even 30 taels of purple gold. Purple gold was an extremely valuable type of metal. It could be used to forge weapons, forge swords, or even arrange formations. Therefore, it was extremely precious. 100 taels of silver was equivalent to 1 tael of purple gold, and 100 taels of gold could only be exchanged for 1 tael of purple gold. However, none of these things were what Chu Xiu wanted. Where exactly did Chu Zongguang hide the treasure? Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something and immediately ran back to the front courtyard. From Chu Zongguang's corpse, he took out a white jade box, which was inscribed with a precious formation. Just now, Chu Xiu had subconsciously forgotten that if it was an ordinary treasure, Chu Zongguang would naturally find a safe place to put it. However, this was a treasure that Chu Zongguang had exchanged his life for, so he would definitely carry it with him. Otherwise, how could he feel at ease? Chu Xiu raised his head and looked at the sky. It was already past midnight, and with such a big movement in the Shen clan, it was hard to guarantee that the news wouldn't spread. Even though he knew that the Chu clan still had plenty of silver and cultivation resources, Chu Xiu didn't dare to delay any longer. But before he left, he still had to clean up the scene. If the 3 Dragon Rider Imperial Army members were dead, then so be it. This was the Northern Yanwei Commandery, not Eastern Qi. Furthermore, Chu Xiu had taken their waste tokens, and others might not be able to recognize his identity. But the crux of the problem was that Shen Mo had also died in the hands of Chu Xiu. If he didn't deal with it, and his older brother who had joined the Azure Water Sword sect continued to investigate, Chu Xiu didn't have the confidence to conceal everything. Chu Xiu walked towards the firewood shed, where the Chu clan had prepared kerosene and firewood. He was going to burn down the Chu clan and end all troubles once and for all. But halfway through, Chu Xiu stopped and looked at the wound on his shoulder with a frown. The Shen clan members should know that Shen Mo had come to the Chu clan. The Tong province prefecture was only so big, and if he started a fire here, it would definitely attract the attention of the Shen clan. With one of his arms crippled with his current condition, it would be difficult for him to even leave the city. After thinking for a moment, Chu Xiu quickly ran back to his previous residence in the Chu clan. He took out his old clothes and changed them into a servant's corpse that was similar in size to him. He threw his old goose feather blade beside the corpse, picked up one of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army's spear, and smashed it into the corpse's head. In an instant, red and white liquid splattered everywhere, and the corpse was no longer recognizable. Because these 3 Dragon Rider Imperial Army members hated Chu Zongguang, they were extremely vicious and cruel when dealing with Chu Zongguang's children. More than one of them had their heads blown off. After giving Shen Mo's corpse a look, Chu Xiu threw the already used 1,000-feather plume at the feet of the last Dragon Rider Imperial Army member. He also stuffed the dagger he had used to kill Shen Bai into the other's hand. He moved the 2 corpses a bit closer to each other, creating the illusion that they had died together. Time was of the essence, and there was no time for Chu Xiu to make any detailed arrangements. However, the Chu clan was already completely wiped out, and the dead could not tell the truth. An ordinary person should not be able to see any flaws. After doing all of this, Chu Xiu hurriedly bandaged his wounds, took a pill, and left the city under the cover of the night, fleeing into the barren mountains of the northern Mang Mountains. Chu Xiu did not go looking for Han Bao and the others. Right now, Chu Xiu did not trust anyone, including Han Bao, whom he had worked with before, and Ma Kuo, whom he had a good relationship with. In the past, Chu Xiu was the second son of the Chu clan of the Tongzhou prefecture. With this identity, he could provide information and cooperate with Han Bao on equal terms. However, Chu Xiu was now a fugitive, and he had a precious treasure on him, so he could not trust anyone. Back then, Chu Zongguang had betrayed his brother for this treasure, let alone others. From Chu Xiu's point of view, strength was far more important than trust. The northern Mang Mountains were very large. Apart from a few small paths that led to the northern Yen side, where caravans and bandits gathered, the other places were all barren mountains. Chu Xiu randomly found a cave to temporarily stay in. After arriving at the cave, Chu Xiu directly threw everything aside and took out the treasure that Chu Zongguang regarded as his life. Just now, Chu Xiu did not carefully look at it, but now that he carefully looked at the array pattern on the jade box, it really did have the style of the West Chu side. The effect of the array was not to seal, but to protect the thing inside from external forces. Chu Xiu opened the jade box, and what appeared in front of Chu Xiu was a bit beyond his expectations. There was actually a living thing inside. Inside the jade box was a golden silkworm. No, to be more accurate, it was a strange golden silkworm that was emitting a golden glaze. It was only the size of a thumb, and its surface was transparent, emitting a glaze luster. If it was not gently wriggling inside the box, Chu Xiu would have suspected that it was a glaze ornament and not a living thing. Chu Xiu's mind was frantically trying to recall what this thing was. It was a treasure that came from the Miaojiang of West Chu. It was shaped like a golden silkworm, and its surface had a glaze luster. Its characteristics were so distinct that as long as it appeared in the original plot, there was no reason for Chu Xiu to forget it. After a moment, Chu Xiu finally found the origin of this thing from the memories of his previous life. He could not help but reveal a look of ecstasy. A treasure, this was definitely a treasure. This was a magical goo refined by the Miaojiang moon-worshipping cult. It was born from the glazed Buddha bone of the Great Light Temple's high monk. It was also a unique existence among the many goo worms. There was only one in the world, and it was the glazed golden silk goo that could rebirth a person. Chapter 45. Miaojiang's moon-worshipping cult had a great background. It was said that it was a branch of the Kunlun devil cult and was best at refining poisonous insects. Later on, the Kunlun devil cult declined and completely split, but moon-worshipping cult was still extremely powerful and was now one of the 7 sects and 8 schools. This so-called glass gold silk goo was a rare treasure that moon-worshipping cult had refined by chance. Legend had it that the demons of moon-worshipping cult had once besieged and killed an eminent monk from the Great Light Temple who had already refined the glass Buddha bone. They had placed several powerful Miaojianggu worms in the glass Buddha bone to nurture. This was originally just an experiment by moon-worshipping cult to humiliate the people from the Great Light Temple, but they did not expect that by chance, the glass gold silk goo would be born in the glass Buddha bone. After that, the powerhouses from the Great Light Temple personally went to Miaojiang and fought with the demons of moon-worshipping cult in an attempt to take back the corpse. In the end, the glass gold silk goo was lost. However, the detailed information of the glass gold silk goo was recorded by moon-worshipping cult in hopes of having the opportunity to refine another glass gold silk goo. Unfortunately, although moon-worshipping cult had obtained the glass Buddha bone of the eminent monk from the Great Light Temple, for some reason, the glass gold silk goo was never refined again. If Chu Xiu's guess was correct, when the glass gold silk goo was lost, it should have been obtained by someone from another force. That was why the second prince of Eastern Qi sent people to snatch it, but they returned empty-handed. Moreover, in the end, whether the glass gold silk goo fell into the hands of the original Chu Xiu, or whether it was brought back to Eastern Qi by the 3 Dragon Riders' Imperial Guards and presented to the second prince was not something that Chu Xiu could know. Chu Xiu picked up the glass gold silk goo. The glass gold silk goo was obediently crawling slowly in Chu Xiu's hand. It was not as fierce as the other goo worms. Perhaps it was because it was born from the glass Buddha bone of an eminent Buddhist monk. Looking at the glass gold thread goo, Chu Xiu's lips could not help but reveal a mocking smile. If he guessed correctly, his cheap father, Chu Zongguang, had been trying to refine this glazed gold thread goo with his innate qi all these years. If Chu Xiu had to evaluate it, he would say that this behavior was really a country bumpkin. High-grade goods naturally had their uses, but Chu Zongguang had been using such a low-grade method to refine the glazed gold thread goo for so many years, even if he used 100 years, he would not succeed. Perhaps Chu Zongguang had tried other methods, but they all failed in the end. But because he had risked his life to obtain this thing, it had become Chu Zongguang's obsession. He had bet the rest of his life on this glazed golden thread goo, and he would not give up until he achieved his goal. In the end, he was even a little crazy. Chu Xiu picked up the red sleeve blade, unbuttoned his clothes, and revealed his chest. He pointed the blade at his chest, and slowly cut open the flesh. The pain made Chu Xiu's face pale, but his hand holding the blade was still firm. After cutting open his chest, Chu Xiu placed the glazed gold thread goo at the edge of the blade. The glazed gold thread goo seemed to smell the smell of blood, and the glass was stained with a trace of blood. It began to crazily drill into Chu Xiu's chest. The endless pain suddenly made Chu Xiu groan in pain, and his head was instantly covered in sweat. The glazed gold thread goo directly drilled into Chu Xiu's chest, and it bit Chu Xiu's heart, sucking the blood from Chu Xiu's heart. But at the same time, strands of golden glazed Buddha light flowed along Chu Xiu's meridians. The wound on his chest began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the blood stopped flowing. Even the bloody hole on his shoulder that was poked by Shen Mo's vein-severing sword finger was rapidly recovering. The broken bone was coiled by the glazed gold thread, connecting the broken bone bit by bit. The pain disappeared, and Chu Xiu closed his eyes. A powerful force cleansed his body, and countless glazed gold thread burst out from his heart, covering Chu Xiu's body, as if this was the power that originated from his bloodline. Chu Xiu opened his eyes. He was afraid of attracting other people, so he only opened his mouth and laughed silently. Being able to quickly recover from injuries was only a small function of the glazed gold thread goo. The real function of the glazed gold thread goo was to let a martial artist be reborn. Even a cripple could become a genius with the help of the glazed gold thread goo. The glazed gold thread goo was the most special goo. All the goo refined by the moon-worshipping cult were extremely fierce and had strong killing power. Only the glazed gold thread goo did not have any attack power, and it could only grow by relying on human heart blood. Chu Zongguang tried to refine the glazed gold thread goo, but it was useless, because the glazed gold thread goo could not be refined by humans, and it could only coexist with humans. Just like now, Chu Xiu nurtured the glazed gold thread goo in his heart, and the glazed gold thread goo survived by sucking Chu Xiu's heart blood. At the same time, the glazed gold thread goo would also release its own power, helping the host to increase their cultivation speed. Of course, the effect of the increase also depended on the strength of the martial artist that coexisted with the glazed gold thread goo. The stronger the martial artist, the stronger their blood and qi, the faster the glazed gold thread goo would grow, and the more power it could provide. Chu Zongguang fantasized that he could reach the heavens in one step after refining the glazed gold thread goo, but he was overthinking it. The glazed gold thread goo was just a shortcut for him to reach the heavens. After putting on his clothes again, Chu Xiu's expression was calm. The secret of the glazed gold thread goo could not be known by outsiders. The glazed gold thread goo could not be refined, and could only coexist with humans. Because of this characteristic, if someone killed Chu Xiu and cut open his chest, they could still take out the glazed gold thread goo and use it for themselves. After coexisting with the glazed gold thread goo, Chu Xiu discovered that his strength had also skyrocketed to the peak of the blood condensation realm. The glazed gold thread goo was attached to Chu Xiu's heart, and the goo's own power spread through Chu Xiu's meridians through his blood. Under the concentration of power, Chu Xiu almost instantly reached the peak of the blood condensation realm, and he could even attempt to break through to the Xiantian realm. However, Chu Xiu was not in a hurry to cultivate. He first wanted to see what kind of good things he had taken from the 3 Dragon Riders' Imperial Army soldiers. The 3 of them had been out for so many years, collecting treasures for the second prince of Eastern Qi. The things they had on them were obviously not trash. There was no need to say much about the red sleeve blade. There were 9 refinement grades for weapons. The first 3 refinement grades were ordinary weapons, while the middle 3 refinement grades were called precious weapons and had their own names. The red sleeve saber was a 5th revolution saber, which was considered a mid-tier precious weapon. Chu Xiu opened the other box, and there were actually 2 martial arts manuals. Dusk Drizzle Red Sleeve Blade, and Great Sacrificial Grappling Hand? Chu Xiu flipped through the manual, and then looked at the red sleeve blade beside him. This technique was actually a set with the blade in his hand. This kind of combination was very mysterious. Moreover, the rank of this Dusk Drizzle Red Sleeve Blade was not low. In Chu Xiu's eyes, it was at least between the 4th or 5th refinement stage. Chu Xiu also looked through the other Great Sacrificial Grappling Hand in detail. The more he looked, the more mysterious Chu Xiu felt. Grappling hand was originally a martial art of the lowest level. It was a type of martial art practiced by ordinary martial artists, and it was somewhat insignificant. However, this Great Sacrificial Grappling Hand could be said to be mysterious. The profound part was that as long as his hand touched anything on the body, even if it was an earring or the corner of a piece of clothing, it would immediately be taken away and unable to escape. Breaking limbs and breaking joints was even easier. The lowest rank of this technique was at least a 4th refinement stage. Abandoning meant abandoning, but the Great Sacrificial Grappling Hand was just the opposite. Not only would it not be abandoned, but once it touched the body, it would be impossible to get rid of it. From the beginning, Chu Xiu only used the blade. His attainments in other martial arts were almost 0. Now that he had the Great Sacrificial Grappling Hand, it could also make up for Chu Xiu's shortcomings. Chu Xiu turned his gaze to the other box. When he opened it, it turned out to be a palm-sized metal box, but it was already opened. Chu Xiu opened the box, and it was also empty. This made Chu Xiu suddenly frown. What did this mean? Could it be that one of the 2 cultivation methods actually came from this secret box? However, this was also a bit wrong. Since the martial arts had already been opened, what was the point of keeping such an empty box? Chu Xiu played with it for a while and felt that something was wrong. He picked up the red sleeve blade and was about to put it into the secret box. The strange thing was that the secret box that was only the size of a palm actually swallowed the red sleeve blade. After putting it into the secret box, the red sleeve blade was actually the size of a thumb. It was very strange. Taking out the red sleeve knife, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "So that's how it is." It turned out to be a space box. The so-called space box was actually a secret box, but inside the box, there was a secret array formation called Sumeru mustard seed array. It took the meaning of Sumeru seed array from a mustard seed. It could be used to store a very large object in a very small space. It was specifically used to store some large objects. This Sumeru mustard seed array was not lost. Many great sects array Dao masters knew about it. However, the materials used to make the array foundation were very rare. Therefore, this space box was also very difficult to refine. It could be regarded as a rare treasure. Chapter 46. Chu Xiu's battle at the Chu clan could be said to be extremely dangerous. As a blood condensation cultivator, he was the weakest of the group. If it weren't for the fact that the internal aura cultivators and the Xiantian cultivators had fought to the death, the final victor would definitely not have been him, Chu Xiu. However, although this battle was dangerous, the rewards added up were enough. It could even be considered a pleasant surprise. Forget about those external objects, the most important thing was the glass golden thread goo, which allowed Chu Xiu's originally average talent to have a qualitative improvement. Of course, the glazed gold thread goo was not omnipotent. As a symbiotic body, the glazed gold thread goo would only return the same amount of strength to the host based on how much qi and blood the host could provide. If the glazed golden thread goo's host was a person who did not want to improve, then the effect would not be great. Chu Xiu placed the two cultivation methods and the treasures he plundered from the Chu family into the secret space box and decided to go into seclusion for a period of time. One was to recuperate from his injuries and make a breakthrough to the Xiantian realm, and the other was to avoid the limelight. Chu Xiu was sure that the entire Tongzhou prefecture had exploded. The Chu family had been exterminated, and the Shen family's patriarch had also died in the Chu family's hands. In such a large Tongzhou prefecture, all the influential forces had been wiped out in a single night. It would be strange if the matter did not blow up. Following the commotion, Shen Mo's brother, Shen Bai, who had already joined the Azure Water Sword sect, would definitely return. It didn't matter if this matter was traced back to him, Chu Xiu wasn't prepared to continue staying in Wei County. The Azure Water Sword sect was the #1 sect in the Wei County, and its influence in the Wei County was absolutely astonishing. Even in the entire pugilistic world, the Azure Water Sword sect was considered a top-notch sect. There were countless sects, aristocratic families, and other martial arts forces in Jianghu, but only a small number of them could be ranked. The largest information-gathering organization in the world of martial arts was called Wind Sweeping Tower, which meant that a storm was coming. All the rumors and information in the world of martial arts, big or small, could not be hidden from Wind Sweeping Tower. Right now, Wind Sweeping Tower had composed a song for the top sects in the pugilistic world, describing all the powerful martial artists in the pugilistic world, the East and West Heavens, the North and South Buddhist sects, Taoism's 3 pure ones, for spirits fusion divine art, the 5 swords divided heaven and earth, the 6 gangs gathered together, the 7 sects performance, the 8 sects shook the universe. 9 families passed down for thousands of years, Jianghu passed down through the ages. In this song formula, the 7 sects and 8 factions had the most members. Even though they didn't stand at the peak, but they had the greatest influence in the martial world. The Azure Water Sword sect was one of the 7 sects and was known as the local tyrant of the Wei County. With Chu Xiu's current strength, he wasn't foolish enough to go against the Azure Water Sword sect. Since he was all alone now, if he didn't stay in Wei County, he could just change to another place. Not long after, there would be a huge opportunity appearing in the northern Yan region, and Chu Xiu was prepared to join in on the fun. As for now, Chu Xiu was preparing to go into seclusion to accumulate strength. Without strength, even if a fortuitous opportunity was right in front of him, Chu Xiu would not dare to take it. While Chu Xiu was in seclusion, the entire Tongzhou prefecture was indeed in an uproar. In fact, some people had already heard the movements of the Chu family that night. However, the Chu family's mansion occupied an entire street. Even if others heard some movements, they didn't dare to rashly come over to investigate. After all, everyone knew that the second young master of the Chu family killed the Shen family's housekeeper, Shen Rong. What if the movements tonight were related to the Shen family? Therefore, they didn't meddle in other people's business. Until the next morning, when the Shen family was suspicious that Shen Emo didn't return for an entire night, they went to the Chu family to inquire about the situation. In the end, no one answered the door, and there was a faint smell of blood drifting out from the courtyard. The Shen family secretly cursed and quickly opened the door. The first thing they saw was a scene of corpses all over the ground. The Chu family of the Tongzhou prefecture was annihilated in a single night. Among the dead was the Shen family's patriarch, Shen Emo. In a place like the Tongzhou prefecture, this was already a huge matter. After the Shen family recovered from the shock, they quickly sent someone to the Azure Watersword sect to inform Shen Bai. For such a huge matter, they could only let Shen Bai personally handle it. 7 days later, the Shen family's clansmen were waiting at the city gate. After a while, there was the sound of horse hooves coming from a distance. 5 riders were rushing over. One of them was dressed in white and had a long sword with a blue scabbard on his back. His appearance was almost exactly the same as Shen Emo, but compared to Shen Emo, Shen Bai's face had an intense indifference that made people feel fear. One of the Shen family's elders walked to Shen Bai's side while trembling with fear. "Young master, you are finally back." Shen Bai dismounted from the horse and his expression was still indifferent, as if he still didn't know that Shen Emo was already dead. He looked at that Shen family's elder until the other party was trembling. Shen Bai then spoke coldly, "My younger brother is dead, why are you all still alive?" Hearing this, that Shen family's elder actually plopped and kneeled on the ground, trembling as he spoke. "Young master, you really don't care about our matters, ah? The patriarch going to the Chu clan was his own decision, how would we dare to obstruct the patriarch?" Back when Shen Emo inherited the patriarch, he ruthlessly beheaded several Shen family's elders. Logically speaking, these Shen family's elders should be afraid of Shen Emo, but in fact, they were most afraid of Shen Bai. Because Shen Bai once told Shen Emo that there was no longer a need for the Shen family to exist. Since they didn't want to be disciplined, then they should all be killed. Anyway, he could bring Shen Emo to join the Azure Watersword sect. Shen Emo at least still had the Shen family in his heart, but in the eyes of this Shen family's young master, the Shen family was truly a dispensable existence. If they were obedient, then they would be kept. If they weren't, then they would all be killed. Looking at this Shen family's elder who was already in tears and snot, Shen Bai spoke indifferently, "Bring me to see the corpses." Hearing this statement, that elder acted as if he was granted amnesty and immediately brought Shen Bai and the others to the morgue to see the corpses. 7 days had passed, and the corpses naturally couldn't be left in the Shen family, or else they would have long started to rot. Therefore, the Shen family's members dealt with all the corpses and placed them in the morgue. After arriving at the morgue, Shen Bai removed the white cloth and looked at Shen Mo's decapitated body. Shen Bai's expression was still as cold as ever, but at this moment, everyone could clearly feel that the coldness on Shen Bai's body had intensified. No one present even dared to breathe loudly. After a long while, Shen Bai cupped his hands towards a middle-aged man behind him who was over 50 years old and dressed like an ordinary martial artist. "Constable Chen, sorry to trouble you." That Constable Chen nodded and said, "Young Master Shen is too polite, it's only right." As he spoke, that Constable Chen cleaned his hands and began to inspect the corpses one by one. He also inquired about the Shen family's situation in detail, such as the strength of the Chu clan's members and whether they had offended anyone. Among the 5 people that Shen Bai brought, 3 of them were Shen family clansmen. They had gone to the Azure Water Sword sect to report to Shenbai, but they didn't know this Constable Chen. A Shen family elder pulled over a clansman who came to report and asked in a low voice, "Who is this Constable Chen?" The clansman who came to report said in a low voice, "This Constable Chen's background isn't small. He is a veteran constable of the Guanzhong torture room. At his peak, he was an inner aura expert of the 5th level of the Qi control realm. However, because his old injuries had relapsed, he could no longer stay in the Guanzhong torture room, so he returned to Wei Prefecture to prepare to retire. When young master heard the news of Patriarch's death, he specially invited this Constable Chen to help. The Shen family elder nodded his head in understanding. So it was a constable from the Guanzhong torture room. No wonder young master was so polite. Even in a small place like Wei Prefecture, the Shen family had heard of the famous Guanzhong torture room. Guanzhong was located in the center of the 3 kingdoms and belonged to the ungoverned area. The order was chaotic. After a temporary truce between the 3 kingdoms, the martial arts world of Guanzhong worked together to establish the Guanzhong torture room to maintain order in Guanzhong. It didn't belong to any sect, nor did it belong to any kingdom. It maintained absolute justice. The Guanzhong torture room didn't care about ordinary people. They were only responsible for maintaining order in Guanzhong, dealing with vendettas in the Jianghu, and chasing down bandits and villains. Therefore, they were also known as constables of the Jianghu. They had rich experience in dealing with such matters. After a long while, Constable Chen stood up and pointed to the corpses of the 3 Dragon Riders' Imperial Army soldiers. The Chu family was massacred by these 3 people. 2 of them used spears and 1 used a saber. Looking at the calluses on their hands and the scars on their bodies, I dare to say that they were martial artists from the military. However, they didn't have a waist token on them, so I couldn't tell which kingdom they were from. According to the scars and the scene when the servants found the corpses, there were 5 people fighting. Constable Chen pointed to Chu Zongguang's corpse and the martial artist with whip scars on his face. The Chu family's patriarch was ruthless enough. He used the 5 poison sex blood transformation pill to launch a sneak attack, causing blood poison to enter his body and blinding his eyes before killing him. The last one should have been killed by your younger brother after he used a weapon with a strong sword intent to activate the sword light. Constable Chen looked at the last Dragon Rider Imperial Army soldier and Chu Zongguang's corpse with a strange expression. As for the last person, when he was fighting with the Chu family's patriarch, he was ambushed by your younger brother. The 2 of them were killed together. The wounds were all in the same place. They were also killed by sword intent. Chapter 47. Constable Chen had been a constable in the Guanzhong torture room for half his life. He had seen all kinds of strange scenes, but this was truly rare. The enemies were obviously the 3 martial artists from the military, but in the end, Shen Mo actually killed Chu Zongguang as well. There was definitely something he wasn't aware of. Shen Bai furrowed his brows and said coldly, "If that's the case, then my brother died together with these 3 people?" Just now, the Shen clan servants had already reported to Shen Bai that in front of Shen Mo's corpse was the corpse of one of the 3 martial artists. The short knife in his hand had directly beheaded Shen Mo. From the looks of it, Shen Mo didn't manage to kill the other party in one strike and gave the other party some time to catch their breath. Constable Chen shook his head and said in a deep voice, "No. Your little brother didn't die together with others. Just now, I said that on the surface, there were 5 people fighting. In fact, there should be 6 people." Constable Chen revealed a trace of a sneer and said, "To be honest, this person's arrangement wasn't considered brilliant, but it was enough to fool ordinary people. For example, when the people from your residence found the corpse, none of them felt anything was wrong. But if they want to fool me, they are still far from it." Constable Chen pointed to the corpse of the last Dragon Rider Imperial Guard and said in a deep voice, "On the surface, he used the 1,000-leaf plume to shatter your little brother's weapon and beheaded him with the last knife. But this person's weapon was a spear." Shen Bai frowned and said, "A person who uses a spear can also use a knife. It is not strange to cultivate two types of weapons at the same time. Constable Chen smiled and said, "It is not strange. A long weapon can be used to sweep and a short weapon can be used for close combat. It is very normal. But what is not normal is a Xiantian realm martial artist holding a weapon that doesn't suit him. No matter how poor a martial artist is, he wouldn't be so poor to the point of fooling around with his own weapon." Young Master Shin can take a closer look. This spear-wielding martial artist's palm joints are thick, but the short knife's handle is relatively small. It is extremely inconvenient to hold the knife. At this moment, Constable Chen pointed at Shinbai's hand and said, "The flesh on your brother's finger is ruptured. If I'm not wrong, he should be using the Azure Water Sword Sex Vein Severing Sword Finger. Because your younger brother had exhausted all of his true qi, the pulse-severing finger sword could only condense all of the qi and blood in his body. As a result, as long as the pulse-severing finger sword hit the opponent, it would cause the flesh and blood to explode. If the attack missed, it would only cause the qi and blood to dissipate. However, the opponent's corpse did not have any traces of being hit by the pulse-severing finger sword. From the looks of it, there should be 6 people fighting in the entire Chu clan. It was this 6th person who killed your younger brother after your younger brother killed the other 2, and in the end, he even created the illusion that both sides had perished together. Who is that person? Shenbai's eyes flashed with a gloomy look. Chu Xiao. Constable Chen said resolutely. Chu Xiao? Who is that? Shenbai asked suspiciously. Constable Chen said, "According to the information provided by the servants in your residence, this Chu Xiao should be the 2nd young master of the Chu clan. He has the cultivation of the blood condensation realm. From the corpses on the scene, this Chu Xiao was like the rest of the Chu clan, slaughtered by the 3 martial artists from the military." Constable Chen's face revealed a trace of a smile that was not a smile. He said, "I didn't suspect him before, but when I was inspecting the corpses, I felt that something was wrong from the corpse of Chu Xiao." Constable Chen removed the white cloth on Chu Xiao's corpse, revealing the corpse that was beyond recognition. I don't know what kind of enmity the 3 martial artists from the military had with the Chu clan, but their attacks were extremely ruthless. However, with the inner aura realm of the 5th level of the Qi-controlling realm against these blood condensation and body-tempering realm martial artists, it was basically a one-sided massacre. Among all the corpses in the Chu clan, only this corpse was the most special. First, his heart was pierced by the tip of a spear with incomparable precision, then his head was smashed. This was very strange. Could it be that when an inner aura realm martial artist fought against a martial artist who was not even in the Xiantian realm, he couldn't be sure that he could kill his opponent in one strike and needed to add another? Of course, it could also be that the other party deeply hated the Chu clan, so his attacks were ruthless. However, the other party only attacked this corpse twice. Why did the martial artist from the military only have such a deep hatred for Chu Xiao? After that, I carefully examined this corpse. Although the corpse has been dead for such a long time, and the qi and blood have congealed, it is impossible to distinguish whether the other party was in the body-tempering realm or the blood condensation realm. However, from the calluses on the hands of this corpse, I can be sure that when the other party was alive, the other party mainly practiced with weapons such as rods and spears, while Chu Xiao used a saber. Finally, Constable Chen spoke in a deep voice. "Young Master Shin, with all these clues added up, I dare say that there is an 80% chance that the person who killed your son is this Chu Xiao." Shenbai's eyes revealed a trace of coldness. Many thanks to Constable Chen. It doesn't matter if this Chu Xiao is the murderer or not. After returning to the Azure Water Sword sect, I will do my best to capture this Chu Xiao in Wei County. Constable Chen nodded. Young Master Shin is too polite. This is what I should do. In fact, there were still many mysteries in this matter. For example, why did the 3 martial artists from the military find the Chu clan? Why did Shin Mo kill Chu Zongguang, etc.? But now, these things were no longer important. He was no longer the constable of the Guanzhong torture room, but a person of the pugilistic world who had returned to his hometown to live in seclusion. If it wasn't for Shenbai's personal invitation, he wouldn't have dared to offend the Azure Watersword sect. In fact, in his heart, Constable Chen was rather curious about Chu Xiu. It had been a long time since he saw such a ruthless and severe youth. 3 Qi inner aura experts, 2 Xiantian martial artists with formidable trump cards. In this chaotic battle, the one who survived was the weakest, Chu Xiu. This was truly inconceivable. And in the end, Chu Xiu even set up the scene at this critical juncture where he could be discovered at any time, creating the illusion of mutual destruction. This was even more difficult. It could be said that if Shenbai didn't invite him out, then the Shen clan's bunch of outsiders would never be able to discover these small details. It was a pity that no matter how ruthless and severe Chu Xiu was, it was useless. Shenbai used the Azure Watersword sect's name to issue an arrest warrant. As long as Chu Xiu was still in Wei County, it was almost impossible for him to escape. After Shenbai returned to the Azure Watersword sect, he indeed used the Azure Watersword sect's name to issue an arrest warrant for Chu Xiu. On the warrant, there was a drawing of Chu Xiu's appearance and physique. Even though the various sects in Wei County were curious as to why the Azure Watersword sect would issue an arrest warrant for a small blood condensation realm cultivator, but with the Azure Watersword sect's status in Wei County, they would give face to the Azure Watersword sect and let their subordinates take note of any traces of Chu Xiu in their territories. But they didn't find any. While the outside world was in an uproar, Chu Xiu was still hiding in the desolate mountains of Shangmang Mountain in seclusion. For 3 consecutive months, he only ate some wild fruits and hunted wild beasts to alleviate his hunger. But Chu Xiu's cultivation was advancing by leaps and bounds. With the glazed gold thread goo, his injuries were completely healed. And with the help of the glazed gold thread goo, Chu Xiu stepped into the Xiantian realm in one go. Qi, blood, tendons, and bones were integrated into one, without any impurities. This was the Xiantian realm. Among the 3 realms of body refinement, the Xiantian realm had already cultivated the physical body to the extreme. The cultivation of the martial Tao had always been one step after another. The 5th level of Qi controlling mainly cultivated one's Qi, but where was the Qi? Within the martial artists' dantian and meridians. So in order to step into the 5th level of Qi controlling, one had to first cultivate the physical body well. Qi was water, and the physical body was like a vessel. How much water could be stored was completely dependent on the size of the vessel. Chu Xiu stepped into the Xiantian realm from the body-tempering realm. Although it took him less than a year, his foundation was incomparably solid. Part of it was because of his hard work, but also the benefits of the Xiantian technique and the glazed gold thread goo. After breaking through to the Xiantian realm, Chu Xiu was not in a hurry to come out. Chu Xiu also familiarized himself with the drizzled dusk red sleeve blade and the great abandoned grappling hand. Actually, the best way to cultivate any martial technique was to adapt to it in actual combat. Right now, Chu Xiu had only cultivated it to the entry level. After almost cultivating the 2 martial techniques to the entry level, Chu Xiu was ready to leave Shangmang Mountain and head for northern Yan. Chu Xiu remembered clearly that not long after, an ancient relic appeared in the northern Yan's Linzhong Commandery's Lu Yang Mountain. It attracted many martial artists to fight over it, and there were many good things in it. Moreover, during that fight, there were no strong martial artists whose strength surpassed the 5th level of Qi controlling. With Chu Xiu's current strength, he was qualified to enter and participate in it. Of course, now Chu Xiu had no choice but to go to northern Yan. He had killed Shinimo and created the illusion that he was dead. There was no place for him in Wei County, at least not for the time being. When leaving Shangmang Mountain, Chu Xiu did not look for Han Bao and the others. Although with Chu Xiu's current strength, he was not afraid of Han Bao's evil intentions. However, the longer he stayed in Wei County, the more danger he would face. Chu Xiu directly entered Shangmang Mountain and entered northern Yan. He did not even pass by Qingyuan town, which was at the border. If Chu Xiu's guess was correct, Gao Bei should be in Qingyuan town. However, Chu Xiu did not look for him because there was no need to. Gao Bei was a dependable person, but his personality was not suitable for the dangerous Jianghu. Chu Xiu asked him to bring a caravan to Qingyuan town. Now that the Chu family had been destroyed, the Chu family's business in Qingyuan town belonged to him. It was not bad to be a wealthy merchant who did not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of his life. The Linzhong commandery of Yan country was next to Wei County. After passing by Qingyuan town, Chu Xiu went straight to Shanyang prefecture of Linzhong commandery. Shanyang prefecture was also a large prefecture in Linzhong commandery. The relic in Luyang Mountains still needed some time to open, so Chu Xiu planned to rest here for a while. Moreover, the annual secret box auction would begin in a few days in Linzhong County, and the location would be in Shanyang Prefecture. It was not one of those cheap secret chests of unknown origin, but one that had a long history. Although it was expensive, the items inside were undoubtedly more reliable. Chu Xiu just happened to know that there were a few good items in this auction. The silver notes and purple gold he brought from the Chu family amounted to nearly 1,000,000 taels of silver. Gold and silver were nothing to a true martial artist. Only strength mattered. Therefore, Chu Xiu was prepared to spend all of these gold and silver treasures in exchange for treasures that could increase his strength. As he stepped into Shanyang Prefecture, the pedestrians on the street all looked at Chu Xiu. The current Chu Xiu was a little too eye-catching. After several months of closed-door training in Shangmang Mountain, Chu Xiu's originally luxurious brocade robe had become dirty. His hair was also a mess. However, his aura did not seem like that of a beggar, so he was still quite eye-catching. Chu Xiu frowned. He first found an inn to freshen up, then went to a tailor's shop to buy a new set of black warrior clothes. He also equipped his red sleeve blade with an inconspicuous sharkskin scabbard. After all, the design of the red sleeve blade was a little too eye-catching. When he was in Tongzhou Prefecture, Chu Xiu still deliberately concealed his strength, so he looked more like a young master of an aristocratic family. But now, Chu Xiu was dressed in black and carried a blade. The biting cold edge of his body was like the edge of a blade. He was completely a young sabersman who was wandering in Jianghu. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.